Hi guys. Tonight we wander into a landscape so cold that your breath freezes in midair before it can rise into the starlight. You step carefully, each crunch of snow echoing like glass underfoot. The moon is so bright it casts blue shadows across the plain, and the wind slides through the trees with a whisper sharp as bone. This is the world of winter, as Native American women once knew it, when warmth was not a guarantee but a miracle, built from instinct and ingenuity. You probably would not last a single night here without a fire, and that's no exaggeration. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, if you're listening right now, tell me where you are and what time it is in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. You picture yourself standing at the edge of a snow-covered prairie, breath clouding, the horizon stretching endless and silver. You pull your furs tighter and follow the faint smoke from a distant camp. The air smells of pine and frozen water, a clean, almost metallic scent that stings your nostrils. Beneath your boots, snow creaks, and in the far-off dark, a wolf cries. The cold feels alive, creeping through your clothes, searching for skin. The people who lived here did not fear this creature called winter. They learned to negotiate with it. They knew every trick of survival, how to read the snow, where to shelter, what to eat, and, most of all, how to sleep. Because sleep was a fragile thing. Too much cold could kill. Yet without sleep, the mind slipped into confusion. And so, women became the architects of the night, engineers of warmth in a world ruled by frost. You trudge closer to the settlement now. No fires burn openly. Not a single flicker glows. Instead, the camp looks swallowed by shadow. It feels wrong at first. Shouldn't there be light? But you remember that fire was not always safe. It drew eyes, enemies, and the curious hunger of the wind. In such places, warmth had to come from other means. A tipi looms ahead, its surface pale in the moonlight, edges trimmed with frost. The flap lifts just enough for you to slip inside. Instantly, the sound of the wind softens. You kneel and look around. The air smells faintly of hide, herbs, and human closeness. The floor is layered with woven mats, grasses, and animal skins. Several women rest there, wrapped in thick furs, their hair gleaming with moisture that the cold cannot steal here. A baby sighs somewhere in the darkness. You realize you're witnessing a centuries-old choreography of survival, no fire. Yet warmth radiates. The secret is in the details. Buffalo hides stretched double thick, rabbit, fur robes lined with feathers, and bodies sleeping close enough to trade heat through skin and breath. Each person is part of a living furnace. You sit and listen. The night is full of tiny noises. Someone shifts. A baby hums. A hide creaks. Outside, snow continues to fall, muting the world. Inside, time seems to slow until your heartbeat matches theirs. You breathe through your nose, feeling the faint humidity that builds inside these shelters, proof that the air itself is alive. It's strange, you think, how quiet can feel like safety, how darkness can mean warmth. Historians still argue whether certain tribes, like the Lakota or the Ojibwe, always avoided fire in the heart of winter nights, or if that was reserved for storms and travel. Some records from early explorers describe night camps without flame. Others speak of coal beds hidden beneath hides. Truth probably lives between those lines, as it so often does. Still, there's no mistaking the ingenuity here. The women you watch are experts of insulation. They knew how to layer hides so that air pockets trapped warmth, the same principle modern engineers use in thermal gear. They understood the science of breathing in small spaces long before anyone called it science. They lined walls with snow, because snow, paradoxically, held heat better than open air. They buried embers outside the sleeping area to warm the ground without smoke. And then there's a fringe detail you might not expect. Some accounts tell of women rubbing bear fat or fish oil into their skin before sleep, The greasy layer acted like natural insulation, keeping moisture out and heat in. It must have smelled pungent, but it worked. Imagine that. Survival by sheen. You lie down beside them now, feeling the fur against your cheek, rough and soft all at once. You curl in the fetal position, knees tucked, arms wrapped around your middle. The trick was always to keep the core warm. The belly, the chest, the heart. Feet and fingers could numb. The heart could not. You press your face into the hide and listen to your own breathing join theirs. A chorus of soft survival. You start to feel drowsy, though the air is cool. Your body begins to believe it's safe. That's when the dreams come, slow and silvery, shaped by the rhythm of the wind and the pulse of the earth below. You wonder if they dreamed differently in the cold, if frost shaped imagination the way it shaped the land. Did they dream of warmth, or had they learned to find beauty in the chill itself? Outside, the snow thickens. You can almost hear it piling, flake upon flake, reshaping the world inch by inch. Somewhere, a river sighs under ice. The stars blink slower now, softened by clouds. Inside the shelter, breath and heartbeats fill the air like the faint hum of a lullaby older than words. In this place, you realize warmth was never just about temperature. It was about connection, people breathing the same air, sharing the same space, trusting the same night. There's a quiet grace in that, a kind of collective surrender to nature's rhythm. You pull the hide a little higher, your fingers brushing fur. The scent of animal, earth, and time wraps around you. You think of how far removed modern life feels from this closeness. We flick switches, pile blankets, or hum ourselves to sleep under neon light. But here, in the stillness of this frozen night, you feel something truer. You feel what it means to be human without barriers, to share the dark, the cold, the breath that keeps everyone alive. Your eyelids grow heavier. The world outside vanishes. The silence deepens, folding over you like a second skin. And though no fire burns, you are warm. The stars fade behind your closed eyes. And for a moment, you understand how they did it not with fire, but with faith in each other, in craft, and in the wisdom of the land itself. You wake to a soundless morning, your eyelashes crusted with frost. The air inside the shelter is cool but not biting, and your breath curls like smoke in the half-light. The buffalo hide wall beside you feels almost warm compared to the world outside. Someone stirs, then another, their movements soft and slow, as if afraid to disturb the delicate warmth that has settled overnight. The smell of hides, dried herbs, and faintly damp fur fills the air. The snow beyond the flap glows faintly blue, light creeping in from a sun that feels distant and tired. You brush the frost from your face, stretch, and realize that during the long night you barely shivered. The secret rests in the structure itself, the way the shelter becomes an organism. It breathes, exhales, and guards its sleepers. Native women were the engineers of these small miracles, the keepers of comfort when the world turned white. The teepee around you is more than a tent. It is a carefully planned machine of survival. The outer layer of hide is thick, treated with smoke to make it water-resistant. Beneath that, another layer adds insulation. Some tribes used reeds, bark, or woven mats for extra padding. Between the layers, thin pockets of air act as invisible walls of warmth, a principle modern architects call passive insulation. The poles lean inward at precise angles, distributing weight evenly so that snow cannot collapse the structure. Everything about it is calculated to defy winter's cruelty. You step outside for a moment, careful not to let too much air rush in. The cold hits your face like a slap, but the silence is almost holy. The land stretches in every direction, blanketed in white. Smoke drifts from a far-off lodge, curling faintly before vanishing. You imagine how this site would have looked centuries ago, when hundreds of these shelters dotted the plains. The most common winter homes among plains tribes were these tipis, but farther north, the Inuit and other Arctic peoples used snow houses, sometimes called igluit. These were not simply piles of snow, but masterpieces of geometry. Each block curved inward, locking together in a spiral so perfect that a single woman could sometimes build one alone in a few hours. Inside, a small platform lifted sleepers above the cold ground, while animal skins lined the walls and floor. The temperature inside could rise from below freezing to comfortable warmth, simply from body heat and the flicker of a small oil lamp. Historians still argue whether some of these snow shelters were temporary travel stations or permanent seasonal homes. What they agree on is the brilliance of the design. Snow, when packed correctly, becomes an insulator rather than an enemy. It traps warmth while blocking wind. Imagine the quiet inside, the way every sound is muffled, every movement wrapped in the soft weight of silence. You picture a woman smoothing the inner wall with her bare hand, her palm leaving faint marks in the snow. Maybe her children sleep nearby, bundled in fur and moss. Outside, the wind howls across the ice, but inside, she hears only breathing. That sound alone must have been a comfort greater than any flame. Farther south, where winters were still harsh but forests stood tall, women of the Iroquois and other woodland tribes built longhouses of bark and wood. Inside, thick mats of woven reeds lined the sleeping platforms. The heat from daytime cooking fires would linger, caught in layers of bark and smoke. To sleep in such a place was to dream inside the ribs of the earth itself. Some early travelers wrote about the thick, smoky air inside these homes, complaining that it stung their eyes. But that smoke carried moisture and warmth, softening the air so that it would not crack the skin or lips. Modern people might wrinkle their noses, but that haze meant safety, meant life. There are curious stories too, less proven but too charming to ignore. A few frontier journals mention women sealing cracks in bark houses with mud mixed with animal fat. Whether that practice was widespread is debated, but it would have worked surprisingly well. The fat repelled water and added another layer of insulation. Resourcefulness was not optional, it was instinct. You step back inside the hide lodge and feel that same instinct humming around you. The air smells of fat and fur, yes, but also of safety. Someone hums a song as she rearranges blankets. You notice how each hide overlaps the next. No gaps, no drafts. The doorway is low, forcing anyone who enters to bow. Heat rises, so keeping the opening small meant keeping warmth inside. Every detail was practical, learned through centuries of trial, error, and intuition. It's humbling, you think, how knowledge passed mostly through hands, not words. A mother taught her daughter by doing, by showing, not by explaining. She might have said, "Feel where the wind seeps in," and pressed her palm to the seam. She might have whispered, "Hear the snow talking? That means it's dry enough for walls." These lessons lived in motion, not in books. The air grows softer as the morning passes. Someone brings in a slab of frozen meat to thaw. Another brushes snow off her coat. Laughter bubbles quietly, light and brief, as if careful not to break the spell of warmth. You realize that for these women, winter was not a season to survive, but a rhythm to dance with. They didn't battle it. They adapted, shaped it, learned its moods. In one corner, you spot an ingenious trick, a suspended hide stretched like a hammock, holding a bundle of dry grasses and furs. That's where a baby sleeps. The height keeps the child away from drafts near the ground, and the hanging motion mimics the sway of a mother's arms. Anthropologists still puzzle over how such details evolved independently across tribes, yet seem universally clever. You reach out and touch the wall of the lodge again. It is cold, but solid, a barrier built not from fear but from understanding. Outside, the storm still rages. Inside, the temperature remains constant, maintained by nothing but balance and care. The design has no wasted effort, no excess. It is pure survival distilled into art. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the past speaking through the creak of hide and the sigh of breath. These shelters were not only structures but symbols of trust in the earth's materials. They remind you that safety can exist without luxury, that warmth can be earned through wisdom rather than fire. You lie down again, feeling the smooth rhythm of your heartbeat against the steady quiet around you. The tipi breathes with you, expanding slightly as warm air rises, contracting as it cools. You imagine hundreds of such breaths across the plains, each one a small miracle, each one proof that warmth does not always glow. Sometimes it hums, quietly, in the dark. You wake before dawn, the air inside the lodge still heavy with the faint smell of hides and snow. A soft pink glow creeps through the seams of the shelter. The others stir slowly, stretching, shaking out blankets, wrapping themselves once more in fur before stepping outside. You sit up, feeling the weight of sleep still clinging to your limbs, and marvel at how warm the space remains. No flame, no smoke, just the deep, slow warmth that lingers after a long night of shared breath. According to most records from early explorers and missionaries, native women were the ones who mastered the art of layering. They understood clothing not as fashion, but as architecture. Every fold, every stitch, every choice of material held a purpose. In a world of freezing air and endless white, they built warmth around their bodies as carefully as they built their homes. You start dressing layer by layer, just as they did. The inner clothing is soft, tanned deerskin that fits close to the body, almost like a second skin. It wicks away moisture so that sweat does not freeze. Over that comes a heavier tunic of fur or hide, thick enough to trap heat but not so bulky that you cannot move. On top of it all, a cloak of rabbit or beaver fur that gleams faintly in the dawn light. You run your fingers over the texture and realize that warmth has a sound, the soft rasp of fur rubbing against fur, the creak of dried leather stretching. A curious side note from some ethnographic writings tells how women used to line the inside of garments with finely shredded cattail fluff, stuffed between hides. It acted like a primitive down, light yet remarkably insulating. When it became damp, they replaced it easily. It was renewable, local, and clever, what today's engineers might call sustainable thermal design. As you adjust your hood, you notice how it fits snugly around your face, leaving only your eyes exposed. The edges are trimmed with fur, not just for beauty, but because fur disrupts the wind and prevents frostbite. Everything is deliberate. Nothing is wasted. Even the laces are sinew flexible, strong and slightly elastic, resisting the stiff bite of cold. Experts remain divided about how standardized these garments were among different tribes. Some records describe elaborate layering systems with specific hides for specific temperatures, while others suggest a simpler, more improvisational approach. Perhaps it depended on the region, the resources, or simply personal skill. What seems certain is that every woman learned from observation, from the tactile knowledge of her hands and the whispered advice of her elders. You step outside now, the cold hitting you but not sinking in. The layers breathe. They move with you, forming small pockets of trapped air that act as invisible heat reservoirs. You take a deep breath. The world smells clean, metallic, and faintly sweet, like frozen sap. The snow beneath your boots sighs, not crunches. The horizon glows pale gold. A few paces away, women hang hides to freeze dry. The sound is soft, rhythmic, like pages turning. You approach and see one rubbing snow onto a wet hide. The snow absorbs grease, freezes, and flakes off, leaving the leather cleaner and more flexible. It's an ancient method of washing without water, learned long before detergents. You smile at the simplicity of it, the beauty and how necessity breeds invention. One lesser-known detail is that some tribes used grass or moss inside moccasins as a natural foot warmer. The fibers trapped air and moisture, keeping toes dry. Before sleeping, they would replace the moss, dry the moccasins by body heat, and start again the next day. It was a small ritual of care, repeated each night, proof that survival came from patience, not luck. As the morning brightens, you see the subtle choreography of camp life. Women brush frost off hides, adjust tipi poles, and check for small cracks in the walls. A child toddles out, bundled like a snowball, giggling as breath fogs around her face. A dog yawns, stretches, and curls back into a ball of fur. Life goes on quietly, deliberately. There's a moment when the wind rises again, carrying a distant howl through the trees. Everyone pauses. They listen, not in fear but in awareness. You realize how closely they lived with nature's moods, reading its breath, responding, never fighting it. The cold was a teacher, not an enemy. You sit near a bundle of tools and examine one. A bone needle so fine it could pass through hide without tearing it. Its smoothness tells you how many hours someone must have spent polishing it, perfecting it. Stitch by stitch, they built comfort into existence. Ethnographers widely note that women's sewing circles were more than labor. They were social centers, places of storytelling, laughter, and quiet wisdom. Around those gatherings, skills passed like invisible threads between generations. A charming bit of folklore tells that each stitch in a winter garment carried a wish for the wearer's safety. To mend a tear was to whisper protection into the hide itself. The act of sewing became spiritual, a small blessing disguised as craft. You run your fingers along a seam and imagine those murmured wishes, still trapped in the thread centuries later. Researchers disagree on how many garments a single family owned through a winter. Some say 3 sets, one for daily use, one for sleeping, and one for ceremonies. Others suggest constant reuse and adaptation, cutting and stitching old hides into new forms. You can almost picture it. Women sitting in the fading light, reshaping a sleeve, adding a fur trim, turning wear into warmth again. Nothing was ever wasted, not a scrap, not a breath. You return inside to the stillness of the lodge. The interior is dim, its air fragrant with pine smoke from a small lamp now fading. You arrange your furs carefully, layering them like the garments themselves. Outer hide, smooth side out. Inner fur side in. Between them, a few dry grasses act as padding. When you lie down, the structure molds around your body. The floor feels softer than you expect, warmed by what little sun seeped through earlier. You close your eyes, imagining hundreds of such mornings across centuries, the same rituals, the same gestures, the same quiet triumph over frost. Survival here was never dramatic. It was patient, repetitive, graceful. Every act, from layering a robe to brushing snow off a hide, was a thread in the great fabric of endurance. Your breathing slows. The cold hums outside like a low drumbeat. Inside, warmth blooms quietly, not from flame, but from human rhythm. The lodge sighs, and so do you. The day stretches ahead, another chance to perfect the art of living without fire. And as you drift into the half-dream of rest before dawn breaks fully, you realize that warmth, like wisdom, is built layer by layer until it becomes part of who you are. You wake to the muffled murmur of movement outside, the kind that only comes when many bodies stir within snow and silence. The tipi is dim, its seams glowing faintly from the pale light beyond. You push aside a hide and glimpse the morning, grey, endless, and beautiful in its emptiness. The wind sighs across the plain like an old storyteller who refuses to stop speaking. Today you learn that warmth, when there is no flame, comes from something deeply human: body heat, shared breath, shared nearness, shared trust. The body itself becomes a furnace, and survival depends on how well people can keep each other close. Documented evidence suggests that among many native tribes, families often slept in tight clusters during the coldest nights. It was not simply affection but efficiency. Each person radiated heat, and when bodies were arranged properly, the temperature could rise dramatically inside a small space. Mothers slept at the center, surrounded by children, while elders stayed at the edges to guard and to let the younger ones absorb more warmth. Even dogs, thick-furred and loyal, curled among them, adding their steady heat to the night. You lie down again, mimicking the pattern. Your shoulder touches another, your back meets fur. It feels awkward for a moment. Modern life teaches distance, but soon you feel a gentle hum of shared warmth. Breath meets air, air meets skin. The space becomes alive. An odd little practice mentioned in early traveler journals described people covering their mouths slightly with fur while sleeping. It kept moisture from escaping too fast and warmed inhaled air, reducing frost buildup. A simple idea, but brilliant. It also muffled sound, preserving the silence that defined winter nights. Inside the shelter, the temperature balances between cold enough to breathe easily and warm enough to rest deeply. You can almost sense the mathematics of it, how bodies adjust unconsciously. If one shifts away, another moves closer. It is like watching a flock of birds align in midair, each movement shaping the next. Academic circles continue to discuss how much of this behavior came from instinct versus teaching. Some anthropologists suggest it was a learned pattern passed down through family lines, while others believe it emerged naturally whenever survival demanded closeness. The truth, as always, probably lies between both cultural wisdom and biological memory, entwined. A woman beside you stirs, lifting a sleeping baby to her chest. She tucks the child under her chin, wrapping them both in the same fur. The baby's small body is warm enough to steam faintly in the frigid air. You imagine the comfort of that rhythm, the steady thump of a heartbeat through layers of hide. According to oral accounts, communal sleeping was not only practical but symbolic. It reminded everyone of connection, that warmth is never an individual achievement. Each person contributed to the safety of the group. To turn away was not independence, it was danger. You think of modern bedrooms, separated by walls and doors, and wonder how lonely the silence must sound to someone from this world. Here, every breath is shared. Every sigh carries the promise of life. A curious aside found in one 18th century trader's notes describes how some women used their own hair as thread to tie bundles of fur together for sleeping mats. The reasoning was both spiritual and functional. Hair bound warmth with life. Hair held memory, and to sleep upon it was to be surrounded by the essence of family. Whether true or embellished, it reveals how even small gestures carried meaning. Experts remain uncertain how often fires were entirely avoided inside shelters. Some accounts mention coals buried under sand or thin stone layers, hidden to provide subtle heat. Others insist there were nights with no ember at all. Yet all agree that the act of sleeping together, bodies pressed, breath mingled, created enough heat to turn freezing air into something bearable. Outside, the storm rises again, a low groan over the plains. The teepee shifts slightly, its poles creaking like the ribs of a giant animal. Inside, warmth persists, built from nothing but proximity. You close your eyes, feeling it seep into your bones. There is tenderness here too, not just survival. In many tribes, nighttime was a time of quiet storytelling, shared under furs before sleep. A mother might hum an old melody, the words half forgotten but the feeling strong. The sound of it merges with the wind outside until you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. One small but fascinating habit among northern tribes was to sleep with stones warmed earlier near the fire, wrapped tightly in cloth or moss. When no fire was safe, they used their bodies instead, pressing those same stones against skin during the day, carrying the captured heat into the night. Even a few degrees could mean comfort, and comfort meant survival. Researchers have noted how sleeping in groups also improved mental endurance. When the world outside was endless ice, to wake and see faces nearby reminded people they were not alone. Solitude in such conditions was as deadly as cold. Companionship became medicine. You imagine now how it must have felt to wake at midnight, the wind crying, snow hissing through cracks, and to feel, instead of fear, the steady warmth of another person's back against yours. That small reassurance, a heartbeat, a breath would have been enough to chase away the thought of death. The night stretches long, time dissolving into cycles of stillness and small movement. Someone shifts, a baby murmurs, a dog sighs. The air tastes faintly of salt and hide. You realize that to live without fire is not to live without light, but to find it differently in breath, in touch, in presence. You pull the fur higher around your shoulders, feeling the weight of it press you into the earth. The rhythm of shared breathing fills your ears until it becomes music. You drift towards sleep again, wrapped in the oldest technology of warmth known to humankind, the simple nearness of another soul. You wake beneath the weight of silence, the kind that feels thick enough to touch. The tipi's hide walls have turned to frost-edged parchment, glimmering faintly in the half-light of dawn. The storm has passed, leaving the world still and white. You push aside the flap and inhale deeply. The cold bites, but not sharply now. It smells of pine resin, frozen water, and faint wood smoke drifting from another camp far away. You can almost taste the clean sting of the air. Today, you explore another secret of warmth, the earth itself. The people who slept through the dead of winter did not always stay above ground. They knew how to borrow the steady heat of the soil beneath the frost. Some nights, they dug themselves into the body of the earth and slept in hollowed spaces that felt both grave and womb, dark yet strangely alive. Ethnographers widely note that several tribes built winter homes partially underground. In the Great Plains, earth lodges served entire families. The Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara used thick layers of soil over timber frames to hold heat. The temperature inside could remain just above freezing, even when the outside world dropped far below. A small vent in the roof allowed air to circulate, while the walls, packed with grass and clay, trapped every whisper of warmth. You climb down into such a space now in your imagination, ducking low through the entrance tunnel. The light fades instantly, and the smell changes to something ancient and rich: dirt, old wood, and the faint sweetness of dried sage. Beneath your feet, the floor feels firm but not frozen. Around the circular chamber, you see the glow of animal fat lamps casting golden shadows on the walls. A curious side note found in early settler diaries mentions that some women placed smooth river stones along the floor to store warmth from the day. These stones absorbed body heat and returned it slowly through the night, creating an invisible network of comfort beneath the bedding. You crouch and touch one, it feels almost alive, holding memory in its cool surface. Interpretations vary among historians about who first developed these lodges and how far the idea spread. Some suggest it came from northern ancestors who adapted snow house techniques to soil. Others think it arose independently along river valleys where clay was plentiful. What remains clear is that women built and maintained these structures with precision, shaping them as if sculpting the body of the earth itself. You sit on a raised sleeping platform made of willow and sod, covered in hides. The ceiling curves above you like a rib cage, strong and protective. Every creak and crack feels intentional. The architecture whispers of balance, a space warm enough to live, yet cool enough to store food without spoilage. The air is damp but gentle, wrapping around you like a slow exhale. According to oral tradition, sleeping close to the ground was also spiritual. The earth was seen as a mother, and resting against her body meant returning to her care. When storms raged above, people said she hummed softly through the soil, singing her children to sleep. You close your eyes and imagine that hum, deep and constant, vibrating through the floor. One lesser-known detail described by 19th century observers is the use of dry grass braided into ropes to tie bedding in place. When frost threatened, women tightened these braids, sealing gaps to prevent drafts. In the morning, they loosened them to let the bedding breathe. It was a daily rhythm, small but essential. The lamps here flicker faintly, fueled by rendered animal fat and moss wicks. The flames are small, almost shy. They do not smoke much, and the scent they give off is faintly sweet. These tiny lights are used sparingly, more for comfort than heat. The true warmth comes from the structure itself, from soil, from body, from stillness. Some anthropologists question how well ventilated these lodges truly were. Accounts differ wildly. One explorer claimed to suffocate within minutes. Another praised the airiness of the design. The discrepancy might have come from timing. When the entrance was sealed for night, airflow slowed, preserving warmth but dulling fresh air. Yet no one truly knows how they balanced it. What you do know is that they survived, and survival rarely allows for mistakes repeated twice. You imagine a family preparing to sleep. The mother checks the bedding, pressing her palm against the floor to feel for dampness. The father adds another hide to the doorway. Children curl together like roots. Outside, the snow muffles every sound, but inside, there is a warmth that feels like a heartbeat. The faint crackle of the lamp, the sigh of settling earth, the rustle of fur, these become the lullaby. A charming bit of folklore tells that if you listened carefully to the walls of an earth lodge, you could hear ancestors whispering through the dirt. Some people pressed their ears to the wall before sleep, asking for dreams that guided hunts or healed illness. Whether belief or metaphor, it speaks to a closeness with nature that modern people rarely feel. As you rest in this underground quiet, you feel protected in a way no fire can offer. Above you, the storm may return, but it will find only silence. The earth absorbs the violence of wind and snow, turning it into stillness. You begin to understand why some communities spent entire winters like this, venturing out only to gather food or water. Researchers note that such lodges lasted for years, often repaired and reused each season. When they were finally abandoned, they sank slowly back into the soil, leaving only faint mounds that archaeologists still uncover today. Each one is a memory of human endurance written in earth instead of ink. You stretch out on the bedding, the hides warm against your cheek. The lamp flickers lower until its glow fades into darkness. Your fingers trace the packed clay of the wall, rough and cool. It feels solid, real, alive. You realize that sleeping here is not just survival, it is communion. The earth gives warmth without burning, protection without noise. Outside, snow begins to fall again, silent and endless. Inside, you lie still, half dreaming, half listening to the heartbeat beneath the ground. It is steady, deep, and old, and you understand why they trusted it more than flame. You drift into sleep with the scent of clay in your nose and the soft sound of the world breathing through you. You awaken in the half-dark again, the air thick with the scent of clay and fur. Your breath curls faintly before you, ghost-like, and the sound of the wind outside feels more distant now, softened by layers of snow. You reach up to touch the ceiling of the lodge and feel the faint drip of melted frost. The small lamp has gone out, yet the air remains warm enough for comfort. It feels like the earth is breathing you back to life. As you stretch, a fine mist of condensation rises from your blanket. It clings to everything, silvering hides and hair. This is where the art of survival deepens. The cold outside can kill, but so can the damp within. Managing breath, sweat, and frost was an unending balance, a ritual learned through patience rather than invention. According to field notes from early anthropologists, native women were the chief caretakers of this delicate equilibrium. They monitored airflow by touch and intuition, opening or closing small vents near the lodge roof depending on the rhythm of breathing inside. It was not science in the modern sense, but it worked as reliably as any formula. You can almost see it now. A woman kneels by the vent, her fingers gliding along the rim of the opening. She feels for the direction of the breeze, then presses a piece of hide into place to redirect it. The faint draft that crosses your cheek feels just right, not too cold, not too stale. She knows it by heart. One small but fascinating habit recorded by missionaries involved rubbing the interior walls with a thin layer of ash or powdered bark. It absorbed moisture and reduced the formation of frost crystals, keeping the air drier overnight. The same material might later be brushed off and reused. Ingenious, yet simple. Experts still disagree about how much humidity these enclosed shelters could endure before becoming dangerous. Some describe mornings coated in rime, others note completely dry walls. Perhaps each tribe found its own rhythm, guided by the specific heartbeat of its land. Whatever the method, the outcome was the same: life preserved through sensitivity rather than dominance. You breathe deeply, tasting the air. It is cool but not biting, heavy but not suffocating. The balance feels alive. In the dimness, you hear someone coughing softly, followed by a rustle of hides. A woman stirs a pouch beside her, pulls out crushed cedar needles, and scatters them across the bedding. The smell fills the room sharp, green, medicinal. The cedar purifies the air, and its faint oil soothes the lungs. You realize that every action here has meaning beyond comfort. It is ritual, habit, protection. According to surviving accounts, before sleeping, people would sometimes chew small bits of dried willow bark to ease headaches brought on by cold air or smoke. The compound in willow later became the foundation of aspirin, though no one called it medicine then. It was simply knowledge passed from mother to daughter, remembered in the fingertips more than in the tongue. A curious side note from early Arctic explorers tells of families deliberately freezing their outer garments each night, then thawing them near their bodies the next morning. The process sealed the seams with frost, preventing wind from entering. What seemed madness was actually logic shaped by centuries of adaptation. You shift in your place now, feeling the condensation settle on your skin. The cold touches you gently, like the brush of a feather. Your breath sounds loud in the quiet, merging with the others. Around you, sleepers exhale in unison, their moisture rising, freezing, falling again. It is a cycle as steady as the moon's pull on the tide. Some researchers today compare these practices to the modern concept of microclimates, the idea that small variations of temperature and humidity create pockets of survival. Here, each body is a sun, each breath a current of heat. The women who tended the shelter were, in essence, environmental engineers. You watch one now in your imagination, crouched near the sleeping forms, checking each hide for dampness. Her hands move fast, but her motions are gentle, precise. She wipes moisture from the fur with snow, then shakes it outside before it can refreeze. The logic feels poetic, using the cold to fight the cold. There is an old tale, rarely told now, about a woman who saved her family during a storm so fierce that even the air seemed to burn with frost. She listened to the wind through the vent and said it sang of danger. She sealed the roof with moss, pressed snow along the cracks, and ordered everyone to lie still. For 2 days they stayed silent in the dark, their breath turning to frost, frost to droplets, droplets to warmth again. When they finally emerged, the snow outside had buried half the lodge, but inside they were alive. Researchers writing in the 20th century called this thermal intuition, a phrase that captures something both scientific and mystical. You sense it now, how the balance of moisture and air feels instinctive, like breathing in time with the world. A lesser-known detail found in Ojibwe oral history speaks of using cattail down not only for insulation but also as a way to monitor moisture. If the down clumped together overnight, it meant the air was too damp. In the morning, they would dry it over their hands and feel the humidity level by touch. 1,000 years before weather stations, they had their own instruments. The lamps flicker again as someone relights them, a small glow illuminating the frost on the ceiling. Tiny droplets fall and disappear into fur. You find yourself entranced by how peaceful it all feels. No fire roaring, no rush, just a gentle hum of warmth and watchfulness. The night outside presses close, whispering through the vent like a distant ocean. You curl deeper into your bedding, feeling the faint moisture on your face turn to crystals that melt again with your breath. There is beauty in this fragility, a reminder that comfort can exist inside danger if one listens carefully enough. You think of your own life, how quickly you chase warmth, electric, instant, sterile. Yet here, every breath, every drop of water on the wall, every careful adjustment becomes part of a living balance. The people who slept through these winters did not conquer the cold. They partnered with it. As you close your eyes, you feel the soft pulse of air moving through the vent above. The sound is steady, rhythmic, almost like the tide washing over a shore. You let it carry you, slow and quiet, into that same ancient rhythm that has cradled humanity for thousands of winters. You wake to the soft sound of scraping outside, like bone on stone. The smell of morning filters through the hide flap, earthy and faintly sweet. The storm has eased, leaving behind a hush so complete that every motion feels sacred. You sit up, still wrapped in furs, and listen. Somewhere close by, a woman hums as she works. The rhythm is patient, almost hypnotic. It draws you toward the world beyond the door, into the cold light. You push aside the flap and step out. The air greets you like glass. The snow stretches in all directions, smooth and glittering. Near the edge of the camp, a group of women kneel beside a pile of pelts, their hands moving with quiet confidence. This is how warmth begins again each day, through hands, craft, and endless care. According to accounts from traders who spent winters among the plains and northern peoples, women were the inventors of comfort. They knew how to turn fur, feather, and plant fiber into soft miracles. The skill was not just practical but artistic. Each piece of material was chosen with intention. Every stitch was a small conversation with the earth. You walk closer, watching as one woman pulls a length of sinew through a needle made from bird bone. She sews rabbit pelts together, fur facing inward, to form a blanket that looks almost alive. The layers gleam in the sunlight, silver and white, light as air yet warm enough to hold back death. One curious detail from old ethnographic notes mentions that the best sleeping blankets were often made from rabbit skins cut into strips and woven like cloth. The overlapping fur created air pockets that trapped heat. It took dozens of hides and hours of quiet concentration, but the result was lighter and warmer than anything a fire could give. Experts remain divided about whether these blankets were used across all tribes or specific to colder regions. Some argue that similar designs appeared independently among groups thousands of miles apart. Others believe they spread through trade and storytelling, passed along like a gift of survival. Whatever the truth, the technique shows a genius for understanding how life itself could be shaped from what the land offered. You kneel beside one of the women, and she lifts a pelt toward you. It smells faintly of smoke and fat. She rubs your fingers across it, showing you how soft the underside feels after tanning. Then she smiles, a small, knowing smile that says you are learning too slowly but trying nonetheless. Her voice is quiet when she speaks, like the sound of water moving under ice. "This one," she murmurs, "was taken before the snow. The fur lies flat, keeps better." You nod, realizing that even the season of a hunt determines the quality of warmth months later. A small but fascinating habit mentioned in Jesuit missionary journals tells of women weaving cattail fibers into sleeping mats. When combined with fur, the mats kept moisture from rising through the floor. They also added scent, faintly sweet and green, that freshened the enclosed space. You can imagine the smell now, light and clean, blending with hide and human breath. Researchers disagree on which materials worked best for specific climates. Some tribes favored goose down, others preferred feathers mixed with grass or milkweed fluff. What all of them shared was resourcefulness. If a creature had warmth, the women learned how to borrow it without waste. They spoke a language of materials, understanding that every texture, every fiber, carried its own kind of wisdom. You watch one woman twist strands of buffalo hair into a cord. The motion looks simple, but you notice the careful tension in her hands. Too tight and the fibers break, too loose and they lose strength. She hums softly while she works, and the sound feels like a spell. The cord will be used to tie a bedding roll, but the act itself is almost ceremonial. According to oral histories, many believed that working with fur required respect. Before cutting or stitching, women would whisper a few words to the spirit of the animal, thanking it for warmth. It was not religion in the formal sense, but gratitude turned ritual. A few elders even said that disrespecting the material could bring a colder winter the next year. You run your hand through the pile of finished furs. The texture shifts from rough to downy, from heavy buffalo hide to delicate rabbit skin. It is like touching the memory of every creature that ever lived in the cold. The air smells of oil, earth, and life. A lesser-known observation from 19th century traders describes how women sometimes layered bird feathers between sheets of tanned fish skin. The result was a flexible, nearly waterproof bedding layer. It repelled moisture while remaining soft enough to sleep on. Few modern fabrics match that balance. Outside, the sky brightens to pale silver. You can see your breath rising, curling away like smoke. Children chase one another in the snow, their laughter sharp against the stillness. A dog shakes itself, scattering frost. You feel the warmth of your clothes, the fur along your neck, and know that every piece of it was shaped by skill, not chance. In some tribes, older women carried a special responsibility. They taught younger ones how to read the quality of materials by touch alone. They could tell if a hide had been scraped too thin, if a feather was too brittle, if a strand of sinew would hold through winter. This tactile literacy was their science, their legacy. One woman near you holds up a finished blanket to the light. It glows faintly, the fibers shimmering. She folds it carefully, presses it against her cheek, and closes her eyes. For her, this is not just craft. It is an act of love. Somewhere within that weave, warmth becomes memory, and memory becomes survival. You look around the camp again. Every corner hums with quiet purpose, hands scraping, sewing, weaving, wrapping. No one rushes, no one complains. The cold is not an obstacle but a condition of life. The women shape beauty from necessity, elegance from endurance. You return inside, carrying one of the rabbit fur blankets. It feels impossibly light, softer than breath. When you settle under it, the warmth arrives slowly, like dawn creeping through fog. You close your eyes, listening to the faint rhythm of the camp outside, the scrape of tools, the whisper of snow, the heartbeat of work that has no beginning and no end. You awaken to the sound of gentle shifting, the faint rustle of hides as someone adjusts their place beside you. The night has passed quietly, yet you can still feel its weight in the air. Outside, the world glows white, the sky bright with a thin, icy Sunday. Inside, the air holds the sleepy warmth left behind by bodies at rest. You breathe in and out, your breath mixing with theirs, feeling the slow rhythm of a community that knows how to survive by harmony rather than haste. You sit up and stretch, your hands brushing the rough weave of a fur blanket. A few women are already awake, moving around with calm precision. One checks the vent flap. Another tightens the bindings on the hide walls. The smallest sounds carry in the quiet, the creak of sinew, the soft padding of bare feet on packed earth. You notice that no one speaks loudly. The morning feels sacred, a bridge between dream and duty. According to records from early explorers, winter mornings were times of careful organization. The camp was divided into tasks that balanced survival with stillness. Even in darkness, life followed rhythm. Sleeping patterns revolved around the natural shifts of wind and temperature. People would wake briefly in the night to adjust bedding, feed infants, or check the shelter seams. Then they would drift back into rest, guided by the soft light of the moon or the faint glow of snow outside. One lesser-known detail noted in ethnographic writings describes how women took turns through the night, rotating near the entrance flap to ensure that the cold did not creep in unnoticed. Each rotation lasted the length of a dream, just long enough to check for drafts, the position of sleepers, or any sound of danger beyond the shelter. The quiet changing of places became a kind of unspoken dance. Interpretations vary among historians regarding whether these rotations were strictly planned or naturally shared. Some say they were deliberate, with older women or widows volunteering for the coldest hours. Others suggest it happened instinctively, a rhythm of care born from countless nights of repetition. Either way, the pattern kept the balance of warmth intact. You imagine it now, the slow shuffle of someone moving toward the entrance, her shadow brushing over you like a breeze. She pauses, listens to the wind, presses her hand against the hide. Then she returns to her place, her body radiating warmth again. No words are needed. It is an ancient system of trust, perfected through silence. A curious practice found in oral accounts describes how families sometimes marked sleeping spots with charms, small stones, shells, or carved wood believed to hold personal energy. These tokens were said to remember the heat of the owner, keeping that space warmer through the night. Whether or not it truly worked, the comfort of believing in such small guardians must have eased many minds. Researchers still discuss the psychological effect of these rotations and rituals. They point out that the predictability of shared tasks reduced fear, allowing for deeper rest. In an environment where the smallest mistake could mean frostbite or worse, routine became protection. The women, as night keepers, became the steady heartbeat of the camp. You pull your blanket tighter and listen. The sound of breathing fills the lodge, layered and rhythmic. You begin to understand that sleeping in such closeness changes something inside you. The mind learns to settle into patterns beyond thought. You sleep lightly, half aware of others, half dreaming. You know without knowing when someone moves, when a vent is adjusted, when the wind changes pitch outside. The body becomes its own form of awareness, woven into the larger pattern. One small yet remarkable note from a missionary's diary mentions that during the harshest winters, people would sleep in short cycles, waking several times throughout the long night. Each waking moment was used for quiet maintenance, adjusting layers, turning hides, brushing off frost. Then sleep would return, soft and easy, guided by exhaustion and calm. It was not the continuous sleep known to modern people, but segmented, deliberate, and deeply restorative. You stretch out again, feeling the ground's solid reassurance beneath you. The faint warmth from the earth travels upward, meeting the heat of your body. The air smells faintly of hide, smoke, and snow. You think about how each element in this space, the materials, the bodies, the air plays a part in maintaining balance. It is less a shelter and more a living system. According to oral history, this constant, shared awareness also built emotional bonds. To sleep beside the same people night after night through the bitter cold was to learn every nuance of their breathing, every sigh, every small sound. Families became attuned to one another, not through words but through quiet endurance. Trust was not spoken but felt. A curious footnote from an old Hudson Bay trader describes how, during particularly fierce winters, even animals were welcomed closer to the sleeping circle. Dogs, trained for hauling or guarding, curled at the edges of the bedding, their body heat mingling with the human warmth. The trader wrote that one night, when the temperature dropped so low that breath froze in mid-air, a dog's steady breathing likely saved a child's life. It was not an exception, but a reminder of how interconnected survival could be. Scholars writing in the early 20th century often missed this detail, focusing instead on tools or structures. Only later did researchers begin to see the beauty of these social patterns, the way cooperation itself became insulation. The physical act of sleeping together shaped both health and culture. You lie still now, imagining those endless rotations in the dark, the hush of movement, the warmth of shared space, the security of knowing someone is always awake, even briefly. Outside, the wind lifts again, brushing snow from the teepee's surface. The sound resembles a sigh, ancient and comforting. The woman nearest the entrance returns to her place. She lies down quietly, pulling a fur over her shoulders. You can see the steam of her breath fading into the dim air. Within moments, her breathing joins the rest. The cycle continues. It occurs to you that this kind of life teaches patience. Warmth is not won by effort but by rhythm. Sleep is not a surrender but a pact with the cold. You are part of something greater than yourself, something as old as the land and as steady as the stars that still glitter beyond the snow. You close your eyes again. The hush settles deep. The next rotation will come, and someone else will rise. For now, you drift into stillness, letting the quiet movements of others keep the cold at bay. The night returns soft and endless. the air thick with the breath of sleep. You lie there listening to the muted shuffle of bodies around you, the faint hum of wind outside. Then something moves near your feet, a sound, a small sigh, followed by the unmistakable rustle of fur. You open your eyes slowly and see the round silhouette of a dog curled near your legs. Its breathing is steady, deep, and comforting. In the world before electric light, warmth often came on four legs. Dogs, lean and strong from pulling sleds or guarding camps, were also sleeping companions. According to accounts from explorers who lived among northern tribes, it was common to find families and their dogs sharing the same bedding during bitter winters. The animals were more than tools. They were living furnaces that gave off constant heat, loyal as kin. You watch the animal stretch, its fur catching a faint glimmer from the moonlight outside. Its smell is a mix of musk, cold air, and earth. The dog shifts closer, pressing its side against your leg. The warmth is instant, steady, and alive. A curious note from one early trader describes how some families even assigned sleeping spots to their dogs, placing them strategically near doorways or children. The animals acted as both sentinels and heaters. Their thick coats absorbed warmth during the day and released it slowly through the night. The smallest child would sleep near the dog's belly, shielded from the cold by a breathing wall of fur. Researchers have long discussed how this relationship shaped the bond between people and animals. Some argue it began from necessity and evolved into companionship. Others believe it was affection first, practicality second. Whatever the order, it worked beautifully. The dog received food, care, and shelter, while the family received warmth and security. You imagine that first moment of mutual trust, centuries ago, a human hand reaching into the snow, a dog curling close, both realizing that survival is easier together. That simple exchange of warmth probably changed history more than any weapon or invention. According to surviving oral traditions, dogs were sometimes treated as family members even after death. Their spirits were believed to guard the camp through the long, dark months, guiding hunters and keeping the cold from entering the dreams of the living. The boundary between the physical and the spiritual blurred in such closeness. One lesser-known detail appears in the notes of a missionary who spent a winter with an Arctic community. He wrote that some women brushed their dogs each evening, collecting shed fur to stuff into sleeping mats or boot liners. It was said to retain heat better than rabbit hair. That same fur might later become part of a baby's cradle padding. The cycle of giving continued, practical and tender at once. You roll slightly and rest your hand on the dog's back. Its fur feels coarse on top but soft beneath, like grass under snow. The steady rise and fall of its breathing fills the silence more completely than any conversation could. You can feel its heartbeat, slow and strong, like a drumbeat under the skin. Anthropologists today note that sleeping beside animals likely reduced stress and preserved mental health during long winters of confinement. The steady rhythm of another living creature eased loneliness. It was, in a sense, an early form of emotional support long before the term existed. A small but fascinating detail recorded by explorers describes how dogs sometimes acted as early alarms. Sensitive to sound and vibration, they could sense changes in wind or snow long before people noticed. A shift in their breathing, a soft whine, might warn of an approaching storm. People learned to read these signs, adjusting bedding or reinforcing the shelter before the worst hit. Experts still debate whether all tribes practiced this nightly companionship. Some written records speak of strict separation between people and animals, especially in the warmer regions where winters were shorter. Others suggest the closeness was nearly universal among those who faced extreme cold. Perhaps it varied with necessity, or perhaps the silence of winter softened every boundary. You think of your own sleeping space, the solitude of modern warmth. It feels strange now, the idea of sleeping apart from everything living. Here, the air hums with shared life, human, animal, earth, and sky. Even the cold seems gentler when it touches so many hearts at once. The dog sighs again, shifting its head until it rests near your feet. You feel a sudden affection for this creature, this companion shaped by the same harsh world. You realize that warmth is not only a physical thing, it is a conversation, a quiet promise between beings, the kind that asks for nothing more than presence. According to one legend told among northern peoples, the first dogs were born from a marriage between frost and fire. Their fur held the memory of both, so they could walk through snow without freezing and lie by humans without burning. When they slept beside you, they shared a spark from that ancient union. The tale might not be literal, but lying here you can believe it. Outside, the wind stirs the snow in long sighs. Inside, the dog's breath matches yours, slow and rhythmic. The two sounds blend until you cannot tell them apart. The warmth spreads upward from your legs to your chest, calm and steady. You close your eyes, thinking how much knowledge lies in the simplest acts, pressing close, sharing heat, listening to the quiet breathing of a friend. The ancestors knew it long before any study or book. To live through the winter, they did not fight the cold. They built small alliances against it, with fur, with earth, with each other. The dog gives a soft, sleepy huff and settles completely still. The room falls silent again except for the faint crackle of snow outside. You drift towards sleep, feeling protected, the warmth of this shared world pressing close around you. You open your eyes to darkness, but not the kind that frightens. It is the soft dark of a winter night, so deep that even the stars seem to breathe slower. The air inside the lodge feels alive, pulsing faintly with warmth left behind by sleep. You lift your head and listen. The quiet is not empty. It has texture, weight, presence. A slow inhale here, a rustle there, a low murmur of wind just outside. Time feels slower, as if the world has forgotten to move. According to the journals of early observers, winter nights could stretch for more than 15 hours in the northern regions. People did not measure time by hours, but by sensations. The feel of the air, the pitch of the wind, the position of stars glimpsed through a vent. They did not fight the long darkness. They arranged their lives to fit inside it. The body adapted naturally, drifting through cycles of waking, resting, and dreaming, all woven together like waves. One small but fascinating detail described in a Hudson Bay Trading Post report tells that during deep winter, communities rarely used fixed words for night or day. They spoke instead of the quiet time and the moving time. In the quiet time, people slept, mended, whispered, and remembered. In the moving time, they gathered, hunted, or prepared food. The two blurred together like twilight and dawn. Scholars continue to discuss how these elongated nights affected health and imagination. Some believe the absence of strict schedules allowed people to rest more fully, following the rhythm of nature. Others suggest it made dreams more vivid, blending waking thought with myth. Perhaps both are true. When light fades for so long, the mind begins to wander freely. You lie still and imagine what it was like to live by starlight alone. Outside, the snow reflects the moon like a second sky. Inside, the faint light that filters through the vent paints ghostly patterns on the hides. You feel your heartbeat slow to match the world's rhythm. Every breath you take seems to echo in the vastness. According to old oral traditions, winter nights were not silent, but musical. People spoke of the wind carrying voices of ancestors, of spirits moving between camps to whisper lessons. The night was not feared, it was listened to. In that listening, people found guidance, patience, and sometimes laughter. A curious side story from an 18th century trader's diary tells of a woman who claimed she could tell the time by the sound of snow falling. She said fresh snow made a softer hiss, while old snow crackled faintly as it settled. Whether truth or imagination, it shows how deeply people tuned their senses to the rhythm of darkness. You begin to notice the small sounds too, the crackle of frozen wood, the sigh of wind pressing against the lodge, the faint pop as ice shifts somewhere outside. It feels like the world is breathing in long, slow cycles. You pull your fur closer and let your body fall into that rhythm. Researchers who study circadian patterns among traditional communities note that such environments created what they call segmented sleep. People would rest for several hours, wake for quiet activity, then drift back into slumber. During those waking intervals, they prayed, carved tools, shared stories, or simply sat in silence. The darkness was not wasted time, but a space for reflection. You imagine the scene: faint lamplight flickering over faces, the glow painting soft halos on the walls. Someone hums an old song, a child stirs and turns. Outside, snow whispers down in endless patience. No clocks, no urgency, only the steady presence of the night itself. One lesser-known fact recorded by Jesuit missionaries is that some tribes marked the passing of long nights by the movement of the moon across a hole in the lodge roof. When it reached a certain angle, they knew it was time to rest again. That natural clock felt far more humane than any ticking device. It connected sleep not to obligation but to beauty. Experts remain divided on how such long nights influence dreams. Some accounts speak of shared dreams that guided entire communities, visions that foretold weather or hunts. Others think these were simple byproducts of exhaustion and imagination. Still, the power of those dreams lingered in songs and stories passed down for generations. You drift closer to sleep, and the line between waking and dreaming fades. You can almost hear voices outside, though you know they are only the wind. Yet in that half state, they sound human, soft laughter, a distant hum. You feel neither afraid nor alone. The darkness is kind tonight. Inside the lodge, a small movement catches your attention. Someone adjusts a fur. Another turns over. The air shifts gently. You realize that even sleep has its own conversation here. Each person's motion shapes the rest, as if all are joined by invisible threads. The temperature inside remains steady, a quiet miracle built on centuries of practice. You think about how many nights like this have passed, how many generations have listened to the same wind, watched the same stars. Survival here was not about endurance alone, but rhythm, an understanding of when to move and when to rest, when to listen and when to dream. A charming bit of lore says that during the longest nights, when snow buried the world completely, people believed the stars listened more closely to human breath. To breathe calmly was to show gratitude for life. To sleep peacefully was to tell the sky that all was well. You close your eyes and breathe slow. The sound of wind becomes ocean-like, vast and soothing. Time loses meaning, melting into the quiet pulse of life around you. You think of warmth not as heat but as stillness, not as comfort but as communion. The stars outside fade behind thin clouds, and you feel the earth hold you tighter. The rhythm of darkness continues, ancient and unbroken, and you let yourself sink into it fully, trusting that morning will find you, as it always has. You wake to a faint smell of herbs and a soft murmur of voices. The air in the lodge is cool but gentle, touched by the smoke of plants drying near the ceiling. You roll onto your side and see a few women gathered by the center, their faces glowing in the low lamplight. Their movements are slow, careful, graceful. They are preparing something. According to the notes of early ethnographers, nightfall was often marked by small rituals meant to ease the mind and body before sleep. People drank herbal teas brewed from wild roots or leaves, rubbed salves into cold skin, or whispered prayers to the quiet air. These gestures were not elaborate ceremonies, but nightly habits that blurred the line between survival and spirituality. You sit up and watch as a woman pours hot water over a handful of dried bark shavings. The steam rises, carrying a sharp, earthy scent. The smell reminds you of pine and soil, comforting and pure. She stirs the mixture with a stick carved smooth by years of use, then pours it into small bowls made from horn. Everyone drinks slowly, silently. The steam fogs their eyelashes, turns their faces soft and calm. One small but fascinating detail preserved in the oral histories of several tribes mentions that before bed, families would drink decoctions made from willow bark, spruce tips, or wild mint. Each had a purpose: to warm the body, quiet the stomach, or ease the chest for breathing. These remedies served as both comfort and medicine. The bitter taste of bark or the sweetness of mint became as familiar as the flavor of life itself. Some researchers today suggest that many of these plants contain natural compounds that relaxed muscles and reduced inflammation, creating a mild sense of calm. But to the people who lived then, the effect was more than chemical. It was a conversation with nature. To sip the earth before sleep was to remind oneself of belonging. A curious custom mentioned by a French trader's journal tells of women sprinkling dried sage around the sleeping area before lying down. They said the scent kept away restless dreams and cold spirits. Whether it did or not, the aroma was soothing. Even now, as you imagine it, the smell of sage drifts through your thoughts, cool and clean. Experts still debate whether these nightly rituals were purely practical or spiritual. Some claim they were grounded in medicine. Others believe they carried symbolic meaning, each plant chosen not only for its effect but its story. In truth, both likely mattered. Healing the body and calming the spirit were never separate acts in a world so deeply tied to the natural rhythm. You watch one woman rubbing a mixture of animal fat and ground herbs onto her hands. The skin gleams in the lamplight. This blend, perhaps made from bear grease or seal oil, protects against the dryness of cold air. She massages it slowly into her fingers, whispering a few words you cannot catch. The act looks like prayer disguised as care. According to travelers' notes from the early 1800s, many native women believed that touch carried warmth more effectively when intention guided it. To rub a child's hands or feet before sleep was to transfer strength, to ensure that the spirit within stayed awake even as the body rested. These gestures were small but full of meaning, passed from mother to daughter in endless continuity. A lesser-known story from Cree oral tradition speaks of the quiet drink, a blend of spruce resin and warm water sipped during blizzards. It was said to strengthen resolve more than the body, to remind those trapped by snow that endurance is a kind of courage. The drink was not about flavor, it was about memory, the taste of trees that still stood tall outside, even when buried under white silence. You reach for a bowl offered by one of the women. The liquid is warm, sharp, with the taste of bark. As you sip, the heat spreads through your chest and into your fingers. The smell of herbs lingers in the air, rich and calming. The room feels softer now. You sense your pulse slowing to match the rhythm of everyone around you. Researchers who study traditional healing note that such rituals served another purpose. They offered structure in a season when the sun disappeared. The repetition of nightly preparation grounded people in the passage of time. In a world without clocks, tea and prayer became markers of the hour. A curious footnote from a missionary account recalls a woman singing softly as she stirred her brew. The song had no words, only gentle syllables repeated over and over, said to mimic the sound of wind through pine branches. It lulled children and adults alike, an ancient lullaby shaped by nature's own music. You close your eyes and imagine that song. The melody floats above the crackle of snow outside, twining with breath and heartbeat. You feel drowsy, yet alert in a peaceful way. The air tastes of sage and spruce. The glow of the lamp fades to amber. When the bowls are empty, the women tidy their space quietly. Each one brushes her hands over the bedding, straightening furs, checking for dampness. The baby, sleeping in the cradle near the corner, sighs softly. Someone hums again, the same lullaby. You realize this, too, is part of the ritual closing the day with sound, not words. A modern anthropologist once wrote that night in the old camps was not a silence but a rhythm. The tea, the singing, the touch, the settling all formed a choreography that eased the mind toward dreams. It was as if the entire community inhaled together, then exhaled into sleep. You lie down again, fur brushing your cheek. The scent of herbs clings faintly to your skin. Your body feels heavy, safe, whole. The night outside presses close, but it is no longer a threat. It feels like an embrace. You listen one last time before drifting off the faint hum of wind, the whisper of the song, the heartbeat of the earth under the floor. The world is quiet now, but it is not empty. It is filled with warmth, invisible and steady, built from hands, breath, and faith. You wake to the faint cry of an infant and the gentle murmur of a mother soothing her child. The world outside the shelter is silent, wrapped in snow and starlight. But inside, life continues small, fragile, and determined. The air smells faintly of hide, milk, and the bitter sweetness of dried berries. You can almost feel the warmth radiating from the mother's body as she rocks her baby close to her chest. Accounts from early travelers tell that in the coldest months, the survival of children depended almost entirely on women's wisdom. They knew every secret of keeping a baby warm without the help of fire. Clothing alone was not enough. Warmth came from touch, from clever materials, and from the rhythm of constant vigilance. One lesser-known detail from Ojibwe oral tradition describes how infants were swaddled in layers of soft moss and fur, the moss first dried and powdered to absorb moisture. It worked like the most perfect natural insulation, keeping the child dry and safe through long, freezing nights. Sometimes, powdered moss was scented with herbs to calm the baby and ward off illness. Researchers who studied these practices found that moss-lined cradles maintained a surprisingly stable temperature, warmed by the mother's breath and the small body inside. Some scientists even compared it to modern thermal wrapping, but to the women who used it, it was simply care, an art learned from observation, perfected by love. You watch as the mother wraps the infant again, her fingers moving with tenderness and precision. She adds a thin, rabbit-skin cover over the moss layer, tucking the edges snugly. Her own clothing is thick, layered with fur and lined with down. The baby barely stirs, cocooned in warmth. According to the notes of explorers who lived among the northern tribes, women often wore cradles against their chests beneath their robes, letting body heat seep through. The rhythm of a heartbeat lulled the child to sleep, while also protecting it from frost. In the most severe storms, mothers slept upright, never letting their infants touch the ground. A curious mention from one French observer describes how some families placed a baby's cradle beside a dog for extra heat. The animal would curl around the small bundle, and its body warmth would keep the baby's breath steady through the night. It was a partnership between species born from necessity, but it spoke of tenderness too. Experts remain divided on how standardized these infant care methods were. Some claim that regional materials determined the specifics: moss in the north, cattail fluff farther south, even shredded bark or down where birds nested. Others believe the practices were universal, linked by shared maternal instinct. Whatever the variation, the outcome was the same: fragile life endured through unrelenting winter. You imagine the weight of that responsibility, night after night, to keep a child breathing through cold that could still the heart in minutes. Yet here, inside this small space, there is calm. The mother hums softly, a song passed down from her own mother. The melody rises and falls like wind through pine trees, simple and soothing. One small but fascinating note recorded by missionaries mentions that mothers sometimes sang to the cold itself, addressing it as if it were a living being. They asked it to be kind, to leave their children untouched. The song was both lullaby and negotiation, a gentle reminder to the world that it must share its space. According to ethnographic evidence, cradles were often made from bent willow branches wrapped in hide or bark. Some were decorated with beads or shells, charms of protection and beauty combined. Before sleeping, mothers touched these charms lightly, whispering a wish for strength or good dreams. The objects shone faintly in lamplight, catching the glow like stars scattered across fur. A researcher once wrote that these charms served as both prayer and promise. They embodied a truth that love could be practical, that care could take physical form. When the baby slept quietly through a storm, That charm was proof of something sacred, human tenderness surviving in the heart of winter. You notice now how the lodge seems to breathe around them. The sound of the storm outside grows softer, muffled by snow. The baby's small sighs blend with the rhythm of wind and fireless warmth. Every sound feels deliberate, each silence alive with meaning. One charming story told among Cree grandmothers says that if a baby slept too soundly, the northern lights would dance faster, worried that the child's spirit might wander away. So the mothers would hum, gently reminding the lights to slow down. The sky, it was said, listened. The baby shifts, its small hand slipping free of the wrappings. The mother tucks it back, kisses the tiny fingers, and closes her eyes. The dog beside her sighs, curls tighter. You feel your own body warm at the sight, a shared quiet reverence for this endurance made beautiful by care. Experts in modern anthropology now recognize that these methods reflect an ecological intelligence rarely matched today. Without machines or measured heat, these women created microclimates of warmth and security. Their designs worked with the body rather than against it, blending biology and environment seamlessly. You lie back, watching the mother and child fade into sleep. The air smells faintly of pine and milk. Outside, snow falls silently, thickening the walls of the world. Inside, the breath of two lives rises and falls, steady as a drumbeat. You realize that survival here is not dramatic or desperate, it is quiet, patient, intimate. You close your eyes and listen to the lullaby still echoing faintly in your mind. It says nothing of fear, only love and endurance, whispered softly into the long night. The morning light creeps through the thin seam of the hide wall, pale and muted. You wake to the faint clink of beads and the low murmur of voices. Outside, the snow glows silver beneath a shy Sunday. Inside, women sit cross-legged around small piles of trade goods, shells, beads, woven cloth, and rolls of soft wool. It is a quiet market of necessity, unfolding not with coins or loud bargaining but with gentle exchanges and knowing glances. According to accounts left by fur traders and early settlers, native women were often the center of winter trade. They bartered not only food or skins but warmth itself, the tools, fabrics, and clever inventions that kept life possible. Through their hands passed beads from Venice, wool from England, shells from the Pacific, and metal needles from distant ports. Each new material found its place beside tradition, shaping a new layer of comfort against the cold. You watch as one woman unwraps a piece of bright wool, its red color glowing against the muted browns of fur and hide. She runs her hand over it slowly, feeling the texture, weighing its usefulness. The wool will not replace the thick hides that keep out the worst cold, but it will line sleeves and wrap feet, adding a softness unknown before the traders came. A curious note in the journal of a Hudson Bay merchant describes how native women sometimes traded intricate beadwork for wool blankets, which they then cut apart and restitched into winter garments. The bright colors became symbols of status and strength, standing out against the snow like small fires of beauty. The women did not simply adopt new materials, they transformed them, weaving outside influence into the fabric of their world. Researchers writing in the early 20th century point out that trade during winter was not only economic but deeply social. The exchange of goods often carried stories, friendships, and even alliances. A strand of beads might pass through 5 or 6 hands before finding its final home, carrying whispers of distant camps with it. The movement of color and texture mirrored the movement of knowledge itself. One small but fascinating detail in the records of early observers describes how women used certain beads not for decoration, but as insulation. They stitched them tightly into leather belts or cuffs, believing the tiny glass spheres trapped air and helped retain body heat. Whether superstition or practical experiment, no one can say for sure, but the idea feels both creative and symbolic beauty serving survival. Some historians remain uncertain about the full extent of these trade networks. While written evidence shows the exchange of wool and beads, Oral stories tell of earlier, more local systems of barter, reeds for fish oil, shell ornaments for tanned hides. It was an economy of relationship, not numbers. Each trade was a conversation between women who understood value in both warmth and story. You picture a scene unfolding outside. A woman from another camp arrives with a bundle wrapped in bark. Inside are precious shells from a distant coast. She offers them for a thick robe lined with beaver fur. The transaction is wordless but meaningful, a bridge built through shared need and mutual respect. The shells will later decorate a child's cradle or a dancer's garment, small circles of ocean carried deep into the snow. According to ethnographic accounts, certain materials carried spiritual weight. Wool dyed red was considered alive, a color that called back the sun during long winters. Beads made from shells represented water, the promise of renewal. To wear them close to the skin was to remember the world beyond the cold. A lesser-known story tells of a grandmother who saved a single blue bead each time she traded, stringing them together until she had enough for a necklace. When her granddaughter was born, she gave it to her with the words, "This is every friendship I've ever made." The necklace became both heirloom and insulation, carrying warmth in more ways than one. You sit among these women now, watching the light play over their faces. The lodge smells of leather, wool, and faint smoke. Their laughter comes quietly, like snow melting on wood. One woman offers you a small pouch of herbs in exchange for a strip of hide. You nod, accepting without words. The trade feels like a gift rather than a deal. Modern scholars often note that such exchanges blurred the line between material and emotional survival. The act of trade reinforced connection, and connection itself was warmth. In a world where isolation could mean death, these moments of exchange tied lives together. You look at the beads again, their colors glowing softly in the dimness. Red for heat, blue for sky, white for snow. Each one catches light, tiny suns captured in glass. It occurs to you that beauty, too, is a form of resistance. In the midst of cold and scarcity, the decision to adorn oneself to make something lovely was a quiet act of defiance, a declaration that life was still worth cherishing. Outside, the light shifts as clouds gather again. The trade slowly ends, the goods wrapped and stored. A few women linger, chatting softly, their laughter faint against the wind. You watch them and understand that commerce, in their world, was not a transaction but a weaving together of lives. The warmth of shared labor, shared survival, shared beauty. You wrap your fur tighter and lie back. The faint rattle of beads remains in your ears like wind through reeds. The world may freeze outside, but inside this circle, color moves, hands work, and hearts remember connection as the first and truest fire. You wake to a sound so faint it barely exists, the soft scuff of feet moving across frozen ground. The air inside the lodge is heavy with the scent of leather and smoke, yet outside, the world waits in perfect stillness. You push aside the hide flap and step into the grey dawn. The cold air presses against your face like glass. Every breath seems to hang in front of you before dissolving into the silence. According to several explorer accounts, winter nights demanded not just warmth but quiet. Silence was both shield and necessity. In lands where the snow carried sound for miles, even the smallest noise could betray a camp's location. Native women understood this deeply, teaching their families to move like shadows, to make peace with stillness. You watch now as the camp stirs to life. No shouting, no sudden movement. Even the children seem to sense the need for calm. They speak in whispers, their laughter barely audible. The dogs stretch and shake themselves without barking. Every sound feels measured, intentional, respectful of the frozen air that amplifies everything. One curious detail recorded by fur traders describes how snow itself could betray movement. A single misstep on crusted ice could echo like thunder. To move quietly, women taught their children to test the ground with toes first, gliding their weight rather than stamping it. They called it walking with the snow, a lesson as practical as it was poetic. Scholars today suggest that this awareness of sound shaped cultural identity as much as the climate did. Silence was not emptiness, but conversation, a shared agreement between people and the land. To live well here meant learning to hear everything and to disturb nothing. You close your eyes and listen. The world hums softly. Snow settles with a faint sigh. Far in the distance, a tree cracks under its own frozen weight. The sound rolls through the valley like a heartbeat before fading away. That single note of nature feels immense, a reminder that quiet does not mean absence, it means attention. A lesser-known note from an early naturalist's journal mentions that during blizzards, entire camps would go hours without speaking. Communication happened through gesture, a nod, a hand raised, a shared glance. Fireless nights demanded this silence even more strictly. The crack of wood or a spark could invite danger from raiders, from wildlife, or from the fierce wind that could catch a single ember and destroy everything. Experts remain uncertain whether these silent hours were formal rule or instinct. Some say they were born of fear, others think they reflected deep respect for nature's balance. The truth likely lies somewhere between. Fear and reverence often share the same heartbeat. You walk farther from the lodge, feeling the snow compress beneath your feet in slow, steady rhythm. The sound is soft but constant, like fabric being folded. You crouch and scoop up a handful, pressing it until it squeaks faintly. Even this noise feels loud. You let it fall, watching the crystals scatter, their shimmer vanishing as quickly as thought. According to oral histories from northern nations, sound carried meaning beyond communication. The whisper of wind through pine trees was read like speech, the groan of ice across a lake was warning. Women, who spent long hours gathering, sewing, or watching children, became experts in listening. They could identify animals by the tone of their footfalls, or predict a storm by the distance of its echoes. One small but fascinating anecdote from an early ethnographer recounts how, during deep winter nights, women could hear wolves moving miles away and mimic their howls softly to confuse them. The sound kept the predators distant, a gentle reminder that humans, too, belonged to the landscape of sound. You return to camp and kneel beside the entrance. A woman is sweeping snow from the doorway with a branch broom. The bristles move soundlessly, the motion slow and circular. She glances up and smiles, her eyes bright against the dull morning. "Quiet makes warmth stay longer," she says softly. The phrase feels like truth disguised as poetry. Modern researchers interpret such sayings as reflections of energy conservation. Speaking, moving, even exhaling too forcefully releases heat. In that sense, silence truly preserved life. But the emotional truth is deeper. Quiet held community together. It was the invisible blanket they all shared. You watch her finish her sweeping and return inside. The lodge swallows sound again, leaving only the muffled rhythm of breathing and the faint whisper of wind. The silence feels alive, filled with 1,000 subtle messages: safety, patience, gratitude. There is an old story among Arctic peoples about a woman who could weave silence itself. Each night, she gathered the quiet moments left after laughter and sewed them into her clothing so she could wear peace wherever she went. When she walked through storms, the wind bent around her. The story may be legend, but it captures something real, the way silence could protect, comfort, and warm. You lie back on your bedding, feeling the stillness settle like snow upon your skin. The sound of your heartbeat joins the steady breath of those around you. Outside, the frozen world waits, vast and calm. You begin to understand that silence is not the absence of life, but its container. It is the space where warmth can breathe. As your eyes grow heavy, you realize that this quiet is not something to escape, but something to cherish. It is both blanket and boundary, a reminder that in the coldest places, peace is born from restraint. The night folds around you gently. The last thing you hear, the soft sigh of snow against hide, a whisper of winter's secret language. You wake to the scent of cold air seeping through the seams of the shelter. The light is blue, thin as ice, and the snow outside lies heavy on the earth. No fire burns in the center tonight. The space feels colder, sharper, and yet no one complains. The people move quietly, layering blankets and hides, adjusting their clothing. There is something deliberate in this absence of flame, something sacred and strategic at once. According to explorers' journals from the early 1800s, there were nights when fire was forbidden, not by superstition alone, but by the wisdom of survival. In open plains or thick forests, the glow of flame could betray a camp's position to rival tribes, animals, or hostile strangers. Smoke could carry for miles, curling like a signal through the frozen air. To stay dark was to stay invisible. You sit still, wrapped in fur, watching as a woman seals the vent at the top of the lodge. Her movements are precise, her face calm. Without fire, the shadows grow deep, but the air feels cleaner, easier to breathe. The cold is sharp but manageable. You sense a quiet pride in the stillness that follows, as if everyone here understands that warmth is not always worth the risk. A curious account recorded by a French trader mentions how some tribes had specific taboos about fire during certain storms. They believed that lighting a flame while the wind howled might invite spirits of cold into the camp. Whether belief or practical wisdom, the outcome was the same. They chose darkness, trusting their shelters and one another. Experts in environmental anthropology suggest that these practices were rooted in remarkable adaptability. The people who lived this way did not depend on a single source of heat. They layered protection, fur, air, body warmth, and structure until they became nearly self-sufficient against the cold. The decision to go without fire was a calculated act of skill, not deprivation. You breathe deeply, feeling the difference. The air smells pure, untouched by smoke. Your ears pick up sounds you never noticed before. The soft sigh of snow against hide, the faint shifting of fabric, the rhythm of heartbeats close by. The world feels more intimate without the crackle of flame. One small but fascinating note found in the diaries of early missionaries describes families using stones heated outside during daylight, buried beneath furs to release warmth slowly through the night. On nights when even that was impossible, they relied only on each other and the thick insulation of their homes. Some slept sitting up, conserving core heat, while others wrapped themselves tightly like seeds waiting for spring. Historians still disagree on how often fireless nights occurred. Some believe they were rare, reserved for moments of danger or migration. Others claim they were common during the worst storms, when lighting a flame inside a snow-sealed lodge risked suffocation. Perhaps both are true. What is certain is that the people knew precisely when to surrender light for life. You look around the dim space. The faint silver of moonlight filters through a small crack in the hide. It paints pale lines on the faces of the sleepers. The air feels heavy but calm. You pull your blanket tighter and feel a subtle warmth begin to bloom from your own body. It spreads slowly, like a quiet fire beneath your skin. According to oral history, some women taught their children to feed the inner flame. They said warmth came from within, when the heart stayed steady, when fear was kept at bay. They would whisper stories of ancestors who traveled across endless snow without fire, guided only by the glow of courage and faith. These stories were more than lessons. They were tools for endurance. A lesser-known belief among certain northern tribes held that fire was alive and temperamental, a spirit that needed rest. To light it constantly was to exhaust it. So, on some nights, families let it sleep. The dark became a respectful silence, an offering to balance the relationship between humans and flame. You press your hand to the ground. The earth feels firm, cold but not cruel. The walls hold steady, breathing faintly with the warmth of life inside. Outside, the wind wails across the plain, wild and untamed. Inside, there is peace. You realize that absence itself can be protective, that darkness can be a kind of guardian. A modern scholar once wrote that for these communities, survival was a conversation between restraint and action. Every decision when to light a fire, when to stay still, reflected centuries of learning. The fireless night, though stark, was proof of mastery over fear. You lie back, staring at the ceiling's faint glimmer of frost. The air has cooled further, but your body adjusts. Your breath clouds and fades. Each inhale feels sharper, cleaner, more honest. You think of the comfort of modern light and heat, how quickly it fills space, how easily it hides the world's natural rhythm. Here, in this ancient quiet, you feel the opposite, a deeper connection to everything that breathes in the dark. Outside, the storm begins to fade. The wind softens into a hum. The people around you sleep in stillness, their warmth shared invisibly, their hearts steady as drums beneath layers of fur. The night feels long, but not lonely. It is the kind of darkness that teaches strength, the kind that preserves instead of taking. You close your eyes, letting the weight of the cold settle gently around you. Somewhere in that silence, the memory of fire remains, waiting patiently. You realize that not every kind of warmth needs to be seen. Some glows exist only within, quiet and eternal. The morning arrives like a sigh, soft and pale. The wind has quieted, and the snow glows faintly under a sky the color of pewter. You rise slowly, your body heavy with sleep, your breath misting in the still air. The camp feels drowsy, suspended between motion and rest. Somewhere nearby, a woman steps outside and tilts her head upward, eyes narrowed against the cold. She is listening not with her ears, but with her whole body. According to the journals of early observers, women who lived close to the land were often skilled at reading the sky. They knew the meaning of every shade of cloud, every tone of wind. Before sleeping, they would pause and listen to the world's smallest signals, the rustle of snow, the hum of air, the pitch of stillness. These subtle clues told them whether the night would stay calm or turn deadly. One small but remarkable note from a trapper's diary describes how women could predict approaching storms by taste alone. They would lick a finger, hold it in the air, and describe the flavor of what was coming. Bitter air meant sleet, metallic air meant deep frost, and the sharpness of iron on the tongue warned of snow so dry it squeaked underfoot. It sounds like magic, but science now explains it. Metallic taste comes from pressure change and electric charge before heavy snow. Scholars who study indigenous meteorology often remark on this sensory literacy, a kind of intelligence not written in books but carved into habit. Women were the first line of weather prediction, shaping how the camp prepared for sleep. Their judgment decided whether the vent should stay open, whether bedding needed extra layers, or whether the night's rest would be broken by wind. You watch one such woman now in your imagination. She crouches, scoops a handful of snow, and presses it between her fingers. Her eyes lift to the horizon, where the sky folds into itself like fabric. She nods once, satisfied, and returns to the shelter. The others do not ask what she saw. They already trust the answer. A curious mention in the records of Arctic expeditions tells how Inuit women could read the sky through sound rather than sight. When the wind passed over certain snow formations, it made a low, humming tone that shifted pitch before a storm. The women heard that change hours before the clouds appeared. To them, the world spoke fluently. They simply listened better than others. Experts still differ on how much of this skill was taught and how much was inherited instinct. Some anthropologists believe environmental knowledge began as intuition honed by generations. Others argue it came from deliberate study, with each mother teaching her daughter the thousand small signs of snow and sky. Perhaps both explanations are true, two halves of the same wisdom. You step outside the lodge and tilt your face upward. The air smells faintly of salt and iron, though the nearest sea lies far away. Snowflakes drift slowly at first, fat and lazy, then grow thinner, more urgent. You realize the storm has already begun, yet the camp moves calmly. People pull hides tighter, dogs curl into their nests, children tuck closer to their mothers. No panic, just acceptance. According to oral traditions, Weather was treated not as an enemy but as a relative, sometimes moody, sometimes kind. When the wind howled too loudly, people spoke to it. When the sky cleared, they thanked it. Before sleep, some whispered greetings to the northern lights, believing the dancing sky could hear them. To ignore the elements was considered disrespectful. To listen was survival. One lesser-known tale, recorded by missionaries, speaks of a woman who could tell the time of night by the way snow hissed against the hide walls. The slower the hiss, the colder the air. The faster it came, the nearer dawn approached. In the quietest hours, when no wind moved, she said the world was holding its breath to rest. Researchers of acoustic ecology now confirm that snow and wind produce specific frequencies depending on humidity and temperature. What science calls data, these women once called music. Their bodies became instruments of perception. You stand there for a long time, listening to the soft rhythm of falling snow. It sounds like sand slipping through fingers, like breath over stone. The longer you listen, the more alive the silence feels. You realize that to them, prediction was not about controlling nature but about cooperating with it. Inside the lodge, preparations shift as the storm strengthens. Vent flaps are closed, blankets are shaken and layered. Someone sprinkles cedar needles onto the bedding to freshen the air. The movements are practiced and calm. There is a rhythm to their readiness, as natural as heartbeat. According to several ethnographic studies, these nightly rituals of listening and adjusting helped create resilience across generations. A single mistake, a vent left open, a wall left too thin, could invite frostbite or suffocation. So, the community learned to treat awareness as a form of love. Observation became protection. A charming bit of folklore tells that when the wind changed direction suddenly, it was the sky's way of reminding sleepers to turn in their beds, so their dreams would not freeze in one position. Whether meant literally or not, the saying captures the poetry of adaptation living in harmony with the breath of the world. You return to your bedding, the soft fur cold against your skin at first but quickly warming. Outside, the snow thickens, falling with the steady rhythm of time itself. You close your eyes, still hearing its voice. It hums softly, ancient and reassuring. You imagine every woman before you, every mother, every dreamer who learned to read this language of air and ice. The wind rattles the vent one last time before settling into quiet. You whisper a small thanks, the kind that dissolves into breath. Then you sleep, trusting the wisdom of the sky that watches over you. You wake in darkness, unsure at first whether it is still night or if dawn hides behind the clouds. The air inside the lodge feels close, filled with the faint scent of fur and breath. Outside, a sharp crack echoes through the silence, so sudden it startles your heart into wakefulness. Then another sound follows, smaller, like a sigh through frozen trees. It takes a moment to realize what it is, the voice of ice itself. According to journals kept by early travelers across northern rivers, the sound of ice shifting was both warning and comfort. To those who lived by snow and water, every tone of cracking frost carried meaning. It might speak of a change in temperature, the coming of a thaw, or the weight of new snow pressing on frozen ground. These sounds were messages, and those who listened closely learned to read them as easily as words. You pull the blanket around your shoulders and listen again. The sound seems to travel through the earth, low and deep, as if the ground were breathing beneath you. The vibration hums up through your body until your teeth faintly buzz. You feel connected to something enormous, ancient, and alive. One small but fascinating note recorded by a 19th century naturalist describes how women often served as the ears of the camp. While men hunted or slept, they remained awake, listening to the groan of frozen lakes or the rhythm of wind moving through trees. From these sounds, they could tell if ice was thick enough to walk upon, or if snow would soon turn to sleet. Their knowledge saved countless lives during travel. Researchers who study traditional ecological wisdom still puzzle over how accurately these people interpreted environmental cues. Some argue they relied on centuries of observation, Others think they sensed subtle vibrations modern instruments barely detect. However it worked, the knowledge was real enough to keep them alive through winters that would humble most. You step outside, careful not to make noise. The sky glows faintly with the shimmer of northern light, colors bleeding green and pink across the horizon. Beneath that strange glow, the snow sparkles like powdered glass. Each sound becomes visible, almost tangible. When the ice cracks again, it feels as though the world is speaking in light. According to oral stories passed down through generations, the language of ice was sacred. Cracks, pops, and sighs were believed to be messages from spirits guarding the frozen rivers. To hear them at night was a reminder of balanced life held in suspension, the world shifting beneath a thin layer of silence. A lesser-known belief among Arctic tribes described ice as the mirror of memory. It reflected not just light, but the presence of those who had walked across it before. To tread lightly on it was to show respect. To listen was to honor the ancestors who once did the same. You crouch and touch the snow, the chill biting through your glove. The surface feels smooth, yet alive, trembling faintly under your palm. The sensation is so subtle you almost think it imagined, but it persists a gentle pulse, as if the frozen world beneath you were a sleeping giant. Historians note that entire systems of navigation once depended on these sounds. Travelers moving by night could follow the echo of cracking frost, knowing that the loudest tones marked the strongest ice. The soft, muffled pops warned of danger. To walk through the dark, guided only by sound, was a form of bravery that defies modern comprehension. One small but poetic story from an Inuit elder tells of a woman who could tell when the river ice would break simply by listening to it sing. She said that before the thaw, the ice began to hum differently, like a voice caught between laughter and sorrow. When it reached that pitch, she warned everyone to move camp. The next morning, the river split apart. Science might call it coincidence, but within her world, it was listening made perfect. Experts continue to discuss whether such interpretations were based purely on hearing or also on vibration felt through the ground. Some evidence suggests that people would press their ears to the ice or touch it lightly with fingertips, letting the movement travel through the bones of their hands. It was science and spirit combined, a conversation with the elements. You stay outside longer than you mean to, entranced by the living silence. The wind whispers across the plains, carrying faint notes of ice and air colliding. Somewhere far off, a fox barks once, the sound cutting through the cold like a spark. Then the world stills again, immense and listening. You think about how, for these people, survival was less about strength than sensitivity. To hear so deeply was to live fully. Their world was not mute but symphonic, each shift of frost or sigh of wind, another note in the great music of winter. When you finally return inside, the warmth feels heavier, the silence thicker. You can still hear the faint echo of ice cracking outside, like the beat of a drum under snow. Someone near you murmurs a short prayer, thanking the spirits of the frozen water for holding through another night. The sound fades, leaving only breath. You lie down and pull your fur close. The world outside keeps singing softly to itself, the ice reshaping as the night deepens. You imagine its rhythm matching your pulse, steady and patient. You drift towards sleep, feeling that ancient vibration still within you, the slow, eternal heartbeat of the frozen earth. You wake to the sound of fingers brushing over cloth, the soft pull of thread against hide. Someone is weaving, and the gentle scrape of the loom's frame fills the space with rhythm. The air smells of smoke and wet snow, but underneath is the faint, sweet scent of fiber, the smell of something being born from work. According to the accounts of early ethnographers, many native women were both artists and engineers of warmth. They created fabrics so intricate and strong that they could replace fur in moderate cold, yet remain light enough for movement. These garments and blankets were not just protection, they were identity, woven with stories, memory, and the quiet pride of survival. You sit up slowly, watching as a woman crouches near the wall, her hands moving with precision. The loom she uses is simple, made of wood and sinew, but her fingers work like musicians, guiding each thread with care. The sound of weaving is soothing, almost hypnotic, a heartbeat within the cold. A lesser-known observation from early traders describes how women used the fibers of milkweed, dogbane, or nettle mixed with hair or fur. They twisted and rolled these materials on their thighs until they became long cords, then wove them into soft, insulating fabrics. The result was light, breathable, and surprisingly warm. Some fibers even carried the sheen of silk when polished with fat or ash. Researchers have since found that these techniques were not only artistic but scientifically effective. The tiny air pockets trapped between the twisted fibers acted as insulation, holding body heat close. Modern textile scientists have compared them to the performance of down or wool, but these materials were crafted without machines, born from the land itself. You reach out and touch a finished piece lying nearby. It feels rough at first, then softens under your fingers, warm as skin. The pattern is geometric, each line repeating like the rhythm of breath. According to oral histories, every pattern carried meaning. Some represented the movement of rivers, others the cycle of stars or the path of the wind. To wear such a fabric was to wrap oneself in story. One curious detail noted in a 19th century missionary's journal tells that during long nights, women often wove by touch alone, their fingers memorizing the paths of thread. In dim light, they could feel mistakes without needing to see them. It was said that the best weavers were those who could work in darkness, guided by patience and intuition. Experts continue to discuss whether these weaving patterns spread through trade or emerged independently across regions. Some designs found in far northern camps resemble those from the southwest, though separated by thousands of miles. The connection, if real, might have traveled not by merchants but by travelers sharing memory through craft. You watch the woman's fingers move faster now. The threads glide smoothly, whispering as they pass. The colors are muted browns, grays, and soft reds dyed with plants and clay. According to ethnobotanical records, women created dyes from willow bark, berry juice, and crushed minerals. Each color carried symbolic meaning: red for life, white for peace, black for protection, yellow for the sun that would return. A small but fascinating story from the Dakota tells of a woman who wove a cloak using threads of grass and strips of hide so fine they looked like hair. When her child fell ill during a blizzard, she wrapped him in it, and he survived. Afterward, the women of her village began weaving the breath cloth, believing it could hold warmth even from a fading body. Whether literal or poetic, the tale reveals a truth. Warmth here was always more than temperature. You notice that the weaver hums as she works, her voice low and steady. The song carries no words, just a rhythm that matches the motion of her hands. In some tribes, it was said that songs sung during weaving bound good fortune into the fabric. A thread made in silence could unravel under stress, but one made with music endured. Researchers now call this concept embodied craftsmanship, the idea that skill carries emotion, that touch and sound can merge into a kind of quiet prayer. To weave warmth is to imagine it, to give it shape before it even exists. As you watch, you realize how much of this labor takes place in stillness. There is no rush, no noise, only the slow pulse of creation. The weaver pauses occasionally to breathe on her hands, warming her fingers before continuing. Her breath becomes part of the fabric too, invisible but present. According to a field note written by a 19th century anthropologist, finished weavings were sometimes hung above sleeping spaces to act as spiritual insulation. The patterns were believed to confuse harmful dreams, tangling them in the design before they could reach the sleeper. Function and faith intertwined until the two became indistinguishable. You look at the woman again. Her shoulders are straight, her face serene. The finished cloth pools in her lap, soft and luminous. She smooths it once, then folds it carefully, placing it beside the bedding. Tomorrow, It will cover a child or a traveler, holding their warmth through the long night. The loom stands silent again, the threads still. Outside, snow falls in slow spirals, catching what little light the clouds allow. Inside, the woven fabric glows faintly in the dimness, a quiet miracle of hands and patience. You realize that warmth can be crafted as surely as it can be shared. It can live in the things we make, in the rhythm of fingers moving to the pulse of the earth. You lie back, feeling the texture of fur beneath you and the echo of thread in your thoughts. The last sound you hear before drifting to sleep is the faint hum of the woman's weaving song, still hanging in the air like a promise of comfort that endures even in silence. The storm has passed, leaving the air so clear that even the stars seem to hum. You wake to quiet voices near the center of the lodge, low and rhythmic, like a tide that rises and falls without sound. The lamp glows faintly, barely touching the faces around it. The women sit close, their hands still, their attention turned inward. You realize they are telling stories. According to the recollections of early traders who wintered with tribal families, storytelling was as essential to survival as food or shelter. It warmed the spirit when the body grew tired of cold. Long nights became bearable through the rhythm of words. These tales did not belong to one teller alone. They belonged to the air, passed from mouth to mouth until they felt older than memory. You settle back beneath your blanket, letting the voices wash over you. The sound is gentle, full of pauses. In the flicker of the small lamp, the storyteller's faces glow and fade like ghosts of the fire that is not burning. One lesser-known detail from the diaries of a 19th-century explorer describes how stories often began in a whisper. The teller would speak softly at first, inviting the listeners to lean closer. The act itself generated warmth, bodies huddled together to hear better, their shared breath raising the temperature in the room. The story began as sound but became heat. Researchers who study oral traditions note that winter storytelling carried layers of meaning. Some tales explained the origins of snow or frost. Others taught lessons about endurance and kindness. Many were meant to remind listeners of patience, of the beauty that hides inside stillness. Each one was both comfort and guidance. You hear a woman's voice now, deep and steady. She tells of the winter spirit, a great figure cloaked in snow who once promised to protect all who respected the cold. When humans forgot gratitude and sought to tame the frost with fire, the spirit withdrew its mercy, sending storms to test them. Only those who learned humility survived. It is a myth, but its truth feels immediate. A curious note written by a Jesuit missionary tells of people laughing during such stories, not from disbelief but affection. They laughed at the clever animals, the foolish men, the sharp-witted grandmothers who outsmarted spirits. Laughter was a form of warmth too, a reminder that joy could live beside hardship. Scholars today often emphasize that oral storytelling was not entertainment but memory work. Each winter, women kept the cultural heartbeat alive through these narratives. They were teachers and historians, preserving values through tone and rhythm rather than ink. The long nights became classrooms where morality, humor, and identity intertwined. You can almost feel that lineage now. The story continues, shifting to another voice, younger but sure. It speaks of a woman who once sewed light into a blanket so her children would not fear the dark. She used the glimmer of stars reflected on snow, catching it with her needle, until the cloth shimmered faintly in the night. When the wind blew hardest, the children looked at the glowing blanket and remembered that light was never gone, only hidden. A charming story, and yet it feels more than imagination. You sense the echo of a real woman somewhere centuries ago, her hands steady as she stitched under the same cold moon. The story may have changed, but her tenderness remains, carried like a spark through generations. A small but fascinating detail recorded by an ethnographer in the early 1900s tells that listeners sometimes hummed quietly during stories, mirroring the cadence of the teller's voice. The hum kept them awake, but it also created a shared vibration through the room. It was as if everyone became part of the same heartbeat. Experts still discuss whether this humming had ritual significance or was simply instinct. Some say it was a way to bind the group emotionally. Others believe it strengthened memory, helping listeners retain details by rhythm. Whatever the reason, the effect was unity. The story existed inside everyone at once. You close your eyes and listen to the hum beginning around you. It rises slowly, soft but powerful, weaving through the storyteller's voice. The sound settles into your bones until you feel as though the story itself breathes through you. The cold outside no longer matters. The warmth here is made of words. According to oral historians, certain stories were never told during summer. They belonged only to the season of stillness, when snow blanketed the earth and darkness ruled the sky. To tell them in the wrong season risked inviting imbalance, calling storms before their time. It was said that even the tales themselves needed rest. One anthropologist once wrote that the greatest warmth in those winter lodges came not from heat, but from attention. People listened with full presence, their minds focused on the rhythm of the voice, their hearts softened by familiarity. That kind of shared listening built a warmth no fire could match. The story near you ends with a long silence. No applause follows, only a collective sigh as everyone breathes out together. The quiet that fills the space afterward feels sacred. In that stillness, you understand why they told stories in the cold, not to escape winter, but to make it beautiful. The lamp flickers once, dimming to an ember glow. Someone whispers a final blessing for peaceful dreams. The hum fades slowly, like snow settling. You close your eyes, still hearing the cadence of the tale echoing in your head, each word wrapping around you like a second skin. As sleep pulls you under, you think about how stories, like warmth, never truly vanish. They live in memory, in breath, in the quiet corners of a long night. The last thing you feel is that hum still vibrating faintly inside you, a thread tying you to everyone who ever waited out the cold with a story in their heart. You wake to a sky that feels heavy with sorrow, its color the pale grey of breath fading on glass. Inside the lodge, the air is still, yet you sense something different in the quiet. No laughter rises, no hum of voices fills the space. A woman near the center sits with her head bowed, a bundle of fur resting across her lap. The others move softly around her, their silence a kind of respect. According to the writings of early missionaries and travelers, grief in winter was an experience both communal and private. The long nights magnified it, stretching emotion until it filled every corner of the dwelling. When death visited, the people met it with calm, folding sorrow into ritual as carefully as they folded hides for warmth. You sit quietly, watching as the women begin to prepare the space. One adjusts the vent to let in more air. Another sprinkles sage and cedar needles on the ground, their fragrance rising in thin curls. The scent cuts through the cold, sharp yet comforting. These gestures, you realize, are not only for mourning but also for protection. The living cleanse the air before sleep so the spirit of the lost one can find its way. A lesser-known note from the diary of a fur trader tells how during midwinter, mourning rituals often took place at night. The darkness was thought to help the spirit travel more easily, unbothered by sunlight's distractions. The family stayed together, sometimes sleeping in shifts, each one keeping a silent vigil as snow whispered outside. Experts who study these traditions often describe them as expressions of continuity. Death was not viewed as an ending but as a movement from one state of being to another. The living did not fight grief, but tended to it, letting it rest beside them like an old companion until it softened. You watch the mother's hands now. They stroke the small bundle gently, smoothing the fur as if taming the air itself. The women around her hum, a melody so low it barely exists, more vibration than sound. The hum threads through the lodge, slow and steady, like breath. According to oral accounts, music during mourning was both comfort and invitation. It soothed the living while calling the departed onward. Each note carried warmth through the cold, reminding everyone that life and death still shared the same space. A curious story preserved in the oral traditions of northern tribes tells of a woman who once sang so softly through the winter that her voice became part of the wind. Her song was said to keep travelers safe from frostbite. When the wind blew gently around their faces, they believed it was her, still singing after death. The story is not tragedy but tenderness, the idea that love can survive the body and become part of the air. Historians remain divided about how widespread these nocturnal mourning songs were. Some records mention them only among northern nations. Others find traces of similar customs as far south as the woodlands. What is certain is that the practice turned grief into warmth. A community that mourned together stayed alive together. The hum grows stronger now, rising and falling in unison. The rhythm feels ancient, familiar even to you, as though you have heard it before in another life. The air vibrates with the sound, and for a moment, the sadness in the room feels lighter. The song is not sorrowful but soothing, an offering to balance the coldness outside. A small but fascinating detail in the writings of an early ethnographer describes the use of red ochre during mourning. Women sometimes rubbed it lightly on their cheeks before sleeping. The pigment symbolized the return of warmth to flesh, a promise that life continues. In the dim light, you see faint traces of it on their faces, glowing like embers in shadow. You think about how these gestures connect body and spirit. Grief here is not hidden or suppressed. It is given shape. The hum, the scent, the color they weave mourning into life's fabric rather than cutting it away. It feels like a lesson whispered from the earth. Everything changes form. Nothing disappears. Researchers writing about winter spirituality often note that such nights blurred the line between ritual and rest. People might fall asleep to the sound of morning songs, their dreams blending with memory and prayer. Sleep itself became sacred, a continuation of conversation with the unseen. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine what it feels like to drift into dreams shaped by love instead of loss. The humming continues, soft but steady, and it wraps around you like a blanket. The sorrow in the room becomes rhythm, and the rhythm becomes peace. One woman lights a small oil lamp for a few breaths, then extinguishes it again, leaving only a thin ribbon of smoke. According to oral tradition, the smoke carries messages upward, where ancestors wait to listen. The air smells faintly of burnt fat and cedar. It mingles with the sound of humming until the two become inseparable. Modern scholars have often missed the beauty of this balance. They write about mourning as a cultural curiosity, but they forget how profoundly human it is to make warmth out of sadness. To sit in the cold and find solace in breath and voice is to declare that life still holds. The hum fades slowly, and the lodge sinks into silence. The woman with the bundle closes her eyes and breathes deeply. Around her, others begin to lie down, pulling blankets over their shoulders. No one speaks, yet the air feels full, pulsing with shared comfort. You realize that even in the darkest hour of loss, the same truth remains. Warmth survives through connection. It may flicker, it may dim, but it does not vanish. The night outside stretches on, deep and endless, but inside hearts still glow softly, beating in time with one another. You rest your head on the fur beneath you, the scent of cedar still sharp in your nose. Sleep comes quietly, gentle as the hum that lingers long after the voices have stopped. You wake before dawn, the air dense with the smell of food. A faint sweetness drifts from the hearth where women crouch, stirring something thick and oily in shallow stone bowls. The sound is soft, almost secretive, the rhythm of spoons scraping the sides. You sit up and feel the ache of hunger spreading through your chest. According to the diaries of early explorers who wintered among native communities, food before sleep was not indulgence but strategy. The body became its own furnace, and the evening meal was the spark that kept it burning. Fat was the best kindling. Hunters carried strips of dried meat or pemmican rich with tallow, while women mixed nuts, seeds, and berries into pastes that released heat through the night. You watch as a woman pours a dark mixture into small wooden cups. The smell is strong and earthy, the scent of rendered fat blended with crushed fruit. She hands one to you with a smile, her fingers warm despite the cold. The first taste is strange, sweet, smoky, slightly bitter, but it spreads quickly through your body, leaving warmth in its wake. A small but fascinating note from an ethnographer describes how people ate before sleep to fuel what they called the slow fire. The body's digestion worked like an ember buried in ash, releasing warmth gradually. It was common for entire families to eat a handful of food in silence, then lie down immediately afterward, letting the heat of nourishment replace the absent flame. Researchers have long debated how nutritional science intersects with such intuition. Modern studies confirm that digesting fat indeed produces lasting internal warmth. Yet, for the people who lived here, no laboratory knowledge was needed. They trusted the proof of their own endurance. You take another sip of the thick mixture. It coats your mouth, heavy and comforting. The air around you smells of smoked meat, berries, and pine ash. You can almost feel the camp's heartbeat slow as the meal ends. According to oral histories, some women used to chant quietly after eating, not words of prayer but sounds of gratitude. They thanked the animals, the seeds, the unseen spirits of nourishment. Eating was never only about survival. It was a renewal of a covenant between people and land. One curious account from a Hudson Bay clerk tells of families who would place a small morsel of food beside the doorway before sleeping. It was a gift for passing spirits or the night wind, ensuring that no hungry presence lingered to disturb dreams. He wrote of it with amusement, but you sense the wisdom behind it, generosity as protection. Experts remain uncertain about the full variety of these night meals. Some reports mention rich stews, others small bites of dried marrow or frozen fish dipped in fat. The ingredients changed with region and season, but the purpose stayed constant. To sleep safely, one must first feed the fire within. You feel the weight of warmth building slowly in your stomach. It spreads outward, softening your muscles. Around you, others begin to settle under their furs. The low murmur of conversation fades until only breathing remains. The lodge feels alive with the quiet sound of digestion and rest. A lesser-known story from Cree tradition tells of a woman who could tell if a storm was coming by the taste of her food. When it lost its sweetness, she said, the air would turn wild within days. The elders laughed at her, but when the blizzard arrived, she simply nodded and stirred another pot. The story lives on as a reminder that food itself can speak when one learns to listen. According to ethnographic records, eating at night also carried emotional weight. Sharing food before sleep was an act of intimacy. Families passed bowls by hand, touching fingers briefly. In that moment, no one was hungry or alone. The same food that warmed the body also stitched hearts together. You close your eyes for a moment, letting your senses take over. The flavor of berries lingers on your tongue. You can hear the faint cracking of frozen trees outside, the sigh of wind against hide. The warmth inside you deepens until it feels like a slow, steady glow spreading from your chest. A detail from an explorer's memoir mentions that during lean years, when fat was scarce, people learned to eat small amounts and then curl tightly while sleeping, conserving every breath of heat. Children were taught to place their hands under their arms, to press their legs together, to breathe through the nose. The discipline of warmth began in the stomach and ended in the mind. Modern nutritionists might call it metabolic endurance, but it was something simpler and more profound, a conversation between body and environment, between hunger and hope. The people who survived the coldest nights did so not by fighting nature, but by cooperating with it. You finish your portion and place the empty cup beside you. The smell of food fades into the earthy scent of fur and smoke. Your body feels heavy now, pleasantly tired. Someone hums a lullaby, slow and low, the kind that seems to melt into the air. Outside, snow drifts past the vent opening, carrying the faint glimmer of starlight. Inside, you feel warm all the way through, the slow fire alive and steady. You pull your blanket closer, letting your breathing fall into rhythm with the others. The last thing you taste is a hint of sweetness on your lips, a reminder of the meal that made sleep possible. The world beyond the lodge may be frozen, but inside you, the ember burns quietly on. You wake to a soft glow filtering through a thin layer of snow that has settled over the top of the lodge. The air inside is quiet, almost sacred, and the stillness feels thick enough to touch. When you lift the hide flap, a breath of icy air slides in, and your eyes meet a landscape made entirely of white. The world has become a single color, soft and endless. The snow stretches to the horizon like a quilt sewn by the sky itself. Its surface shines faintly under the pale morning sun, every ridge and hollow perfectly smooth. You step outside carefully, your boots sinking a little, and feel the strange warmth beneath the first layer of snow. It is cold above, yet the ground below feels almost gentle. According to explorers who spent winters among northern tribes, snow was both enemy and ally. It could bury entire camps, crush food stores, and suffocate travelers. Yet it was also one of the most effective insulators ever known. To sleep under snow was to surrender to its paradox, to trust that the thing which froze the world could also protect it. A small but fascinating record from an early fur trader mentions that in severe blizzards, families sometimes built snow mounds around their lodges on purpose, packing them tight to trap the warmth inside. The snow sealed the cracks in the hide and muted the wind. What looked like entrapment from the outside was, in truth, shelter. Researchers studying indigenous engineering have since confirmed that packed snow holds heat astonishingly well. The air trapped in each flake acts as insulation, turning a deadly storm into an unexpected blessing. While modern people might fear being buried, the ancestors knew how to shape snow into safety. You walk a little farther from the camp and notice a low mound near the edge of the trees. You kneel and brush your glove over it, uncovering a small opening. The air that escapes is surprisingly warm. Inside, someone has dug a sleeping hollow lined with spruce branches and hides. The snow above forms a domed roof, curved and perfect. It is not a grave, but a cradle. According to oral histories, such temporary shelters were used during travel or hunting. When night fell far from camp, women built small snow dens for rest. They would press snow into blocks, shape an entrance tunnel, and seal it once inside. The body's own heat transformed the hollow into a soft, glowing chamber. Breath condensed along the ceiling, freezing into a fragile shell of ice that sparkled by lamplight. A curious account from a Scottish explorer in the 1700s tells of his astonishment after sleeping in one of these shelters. He wrote that the inside felt no colder than a London bedroom in autumn. He did not know then that he was resting within one of nature's finest inventions, perfected by centuries of quiet trial and error. Experts remain divided on whether these snow shelters were common across all northern peoples or reserved for emergencies. Some claim entire families could rest inside. Others describe them as solitary retreats. Regardless, they were acts of trust, faith in snow, in silence, in the wisdom of the earth itself. You crawl a little closer to the opening and imagine what it must feel like to sleep within that glowing cocoon. The air inside would be still, heavy with breath, but soft. No wind, no noise, only the faint hiss of snow falling on the roof. The darkness would be complete, yet comforting, a place where thought itself slows. According to oral tradition, some women believed that sleeping beneath snow connected them to the spirits of winter. They said the snow remembered every sound, every dream, every whisper, holding it safe until spring returned. Children were told to listen closely while falling asleep. If they were quiet enough, they could hear the snow breathing with them. A lesser-known story collected by missionaries describes how a girl lost in a storm dug herself into a drift and slept through the night. When she awoke, she claimed to have heard the snow singing. The melody was said to carry messages from the earth songs of hibernating animals, sleeping rivers, and resting ancestors. Modern scientists would speak of acoustics and thermal insulation, but there is poetry in the older explanation. The snow did sing, in its own way, reshaping sound until even the loudest noise became calm. You return to camp, your boots crunching softly on the crust. The women are brushing snow away from the lodge walls, their movements calm and practiced. Each sweep of a branch reveals a little more of the curved surface beneath. When they finish, the structure glows faintly against the light, clean and whole again. According to ethnographic records, some communities celebrated the first heavy snowfall as a gift, not a burden. It meant the land was sealed, the cold locked away, the old year safely resting. Families would gather that night and tell stories about the snow mothers, gentle spirits who covered the world to keep it from cracking apart. You can almost feel that tenderness now. The snow beneath your boots creaks softly, not in warning but in greeting. The air feels thicker, quieter. The ground itself seems to breathe beneath the white. You crawl back inside the lodge, brushing snow from your sleeves. The air feels warmer than before, the snow's weight pressing gently on the roof. Someone adds a few drops of fat to the lamp, and the light glows golden against the white ceiling. Outside, the wind begins again, but its voice is softer now, muffled by the world's new blanket. You pull your fur closer and lie down, imagining the snow as a guardian rather than an enemy. Its cold touch is the touch of patience, of rest. You close your eyes, feeling that protective weight above you. Somewhere in the darkness, the snow hums faintly, a lullaby for those who know how to trust it. You wake to a faint crackle in your chest, the feeling of air that bites when you breathe too quickly. The cold has deepened, sharp enough now to sting the lungs. Around you, the lodge is still, the light outside muted by snow. A few women move quietly in the corner, their hands busy with small bundles of herbs and bark. The air fills with the smell of spruce and smoke. According to early reports by fur traders, winter was as much a season of medicine as it was of endurance. Every family carried small pouches filled with dried plants, roots, and powders gathered in warmer months. The women were healers by necessity, doctors shaped by observation and the patience of nature. They did not rely on luck, but on a deep understanding of what the land offered in return for respect. You watch as one woman fills a cup with water, then drops thin strips of willow bark into it. The scent that rises is bitter, earthy, alive. She stirs with a carved bone spoon and hums softly while it steeps. The steam curls upward, painting the air with a ghost of warmth. A small but fascinating detail recorded by explorers describes how willow bark tea was a nightly remedy for fever, headache, or soreness from the cold. It contained salicin, a compound that eases pain and lowers inflammation, though no one then used such words. To them, it was simple truth. The tree gives, the body heals. Experts in ethnobotany have since confirmed that this knowledge was not superstition but precise science, learned through centuries of testing and trust. The medicine women observed patterns: how one plant soothed, how another cleansed, how another revived the weak after frostbite. Their healing was as much art as knowledge. You watch her pour the tea into small bowls and pass them around. The liquid is dark and smoky, its heat seeping into your hands through the wood. The first sip burns slightly, but the taste carries life with it, a reminder that even bitterness has its purpose. According to oral accounts, every medicine had a story. Spruce needles brewed in water were said to hold the spirit of the forest, protecting the lungs. Cedar tea restored strength to travelers. Labrador leaves soothed the heart and steadied the pulse. To drink these brews before sleep was to welcome the forest into your veins. A curious note from a 19th century missionary tells of women mixing ashes from burned moss with animal fat to make a salve for frostbite. The mixture was dark grey and carried a strange smell, but it healed cracked skin better than any imported balm. The missionary wrote of his astonishment, not understanding that healing sometimes required embracing the earth's darker gifts. Scholars today discuss these medicines as examples of ecological harmony, but to the people who lived them, it was never theory. It was survival wrapped in reverence. The plants were not possessions but relatives, each one offering something in return for care. You feel the warmth of the tea spreading through you, easing the tightness in your chest. The woman beside you rubs a mixture of bear grease and pine resin on her arms. The smell is strong, sharp with life. She smiles faintly when she sees you watching. "It keeps the wind out," she says, and you believe her. According to stories passed down through generations, winter illnesses were treated as lessons rather than punishments. A cough meant the air was too dry. Aching limbs meant the fire of movement had gone out. Healing began with balance. If a body grew too cold, warmth came not only from medicine but from kindness. A shared blanket, a hand resting on a fevered forehead, a song hummed low. One lesser-known custom mentioned in explorers' journals describes how before sleeping, the sick would be placed in the center of the lodge, where warmth gathered thickest. Others would sleep close around them, lending heat from their own bodies. The act was both practical and sacred, an affirmation that no one faced the cold alone. Researchers continue to debate how effective some of these practices were by modern standards. Yet what is undeniable is their compassion. The medicine was not only in the herbs, but in the closeness, in the patience, in the quiet confidence that nature and humanity could heal each other. You lie back again, your body settling into warmth that now feels more fluid, less fragile. The air smells of bark and resin. Someone begins to hum a soft tune, one used to lull the sick toward peaceful dreams. The sound moves through the air like smoke, dissolving into stillness. According to oral tradition, such songs were believed to carry healing through the breath itself. The voice, warmed by intention, passed comfort directly into the air. It was said that sickness fled from music, just as frost fled from light. You close your eyes, letting the sound flow through you. Your breathing steadies, the ache in your chest fading. You realize that medicine in this world is not a fight, but a conversation. The body whispers its needs, and the earth answers in roots, leaves, and sound. The hum grows softer, fading into the rhythm of wind against the walls. You drift toward sleep, feeling the pulse of life inside you, a gentle warmth that no storm can touch. The snow outside continues to fall, but inside, healing glows quietly, steady as breath. You wake slowly, your body heavy and comfortable, wrapped in layers of fur that smell faintly of cedar smoke. The air in the lodge is dim and still, and a hush has settled over the camp as if the snow itself has paused to listen. You blink, and for a moment, you cannot tell whether you are awake or still inside a dream. Around you, others stir quietly, their faces calm and distant, their eyes unfocused. You realize that dreams here are more than simple shadows of thought. They are maps, messages, and warnings. According to early explorers who lived among tribal communities through the long winters, dreams were regarded with the same seriousness as weather. Each morning, people spoke softly of what they had seen in the night, piecing together meanings that might guide their choices. A dream could reveal when to move camp, when to hunt, or when to wait out the cold. For women especially, dreaming was seen as a sacred skill, a bridge between the visible and the unseen. You sit up slowly, pulling the fur closer around your shoulders. The woman beside you is already awake, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. She speaks in a low voice, describing the image that came to her during the night, a river that flowed backward, carrying leaves of silver instead of ice. The others listen carefully. No one dismisses her. They nod, thoughtful, letting the image settle before offering quiet interpretations. A small but fascinating note from a 19th century trader tells of dream circles, morning gatherings where women shared what visions they had experienced through the night. Each listener would add meaning or memory, layering their understanding like brushstrokes on the same picture. Through such collective reflection, Dreams became tools of decision rather than mysteries to fear. Researchers who study indigenous psychology have written that these traditions served both practical and emotional purposes. Dreams provided a safe space to express fear or hope in a landscape that offered little control. In a world ruled by cold and uncertainty, the mind became its own compass, pointing towards survival through symbols. You remember fragments of your own dream, a field of frozen grass bending beneath a strange blue light, and the distant sound of something moving beneath the ice. You keep the images to yourself but sense their meaning. Perhaps they are reminders of patience, of movement hidden beneath stillness. According to oral histories, certain dreams were considered communal rather than personal. A woman who saw the same symbol as another, an animal, a storm, a flame, might visit her friend to share the vision. They would speak in whispers and light a small lamp between them, believing that the flame drew clarity. If the meaning remained unclear, they waited, trusting the dream to explain itself later. A curious story recorded by missionaries tells of a woman who dreamed of snow falling upward into the sky. She woke and told her village that the winter would soon break. Days later, warm winds arrived, and the snow began to melt so quickly it seemed to lift into the air. The people still spoke of her vision years afterward, calling her the listener of sky. Experts continue to discuss whether these practices were purely spiritual or reflected deep observation of the environment. Many of the dreams that guided behavior corresponded to subtle weather shifts or animal patterns. Perhaps the subconscious noticed signs the conscious mind ignored. Either way, dreams became survival. You notice a young girl whispering to her grandmother, describing a dream of a bird that flew without sound. The grandmother smiles and places her hand gently on the girl's head. "The quiet bird brings safe days," she murmurs. Her words settle over the room like a blessing. You can almost feel the warmth of belief spreading through the group, a comfort greater than any fire. A lesser-known practice mentioned in ethnographic notes describes how people prepared themselves for good dreams. Before sleeping, they would breathe deeply 3 times, facing the direction of the wind. Some placed a small stone or feather under their bedding, believing it could draw peaceful visions. These gestures turned rest into ritual, shaping the imagination as carefully as they shaped the lodges themselves. According to scholars of comparative mythology, dreaming in such communities was not escapism but education. The night became a classroom, and the teacher was the unseen world. A good dream strengthened the heart for the coming day. Even nightmares had purpose. They taught caution, humility, or the wisdom of endurance. You lean back and listen as the morning talk fades. People begin to move again, dressing, checking their bedding, feeding the dogs. Yet something lingers in the air, a collective patience born from the knowledge that what happens in sleep is not separate from life. The mind, they believe, walks the same paths the body does, only under different light. A small but beautiful tale from the plains tells of a woman who dreamed of a star descending to rest on her hand. When she woke, she found a tiny piece of mica clinging to her palm. She kept it always, believing that dreams sometimes leave traces if one is gentle enough to receive them. You glance down at your own hands, the skin dry and pale from the cold. You rub your fingers together, half hoping for a sign, half content with the warmth returning to your palms. Around you, the world feels changed, though nothing has moved. Outside, the snow glows softly in the first full light of day. Inside, you sense that each person carries within them a fragment of night, a small guiding spark. Dreams have become invisible maps of survival, leading through both frost and time. You close your eyes again for a moment, the scent of cedar and fir heavy in your lungs. You imagine walking through that blue field from your own dream, the quiet birds still circling above. The sound of wind fades into silence, and you rest there, between the waking world and the one that teaches in sleep. The night settles thick around the camp, the kind of darkness that feels soft and endless. You lie awake for a while, your eyes tracing the faint curve of the lodge's ceiling. No flames flicker tonight, only the faint light of snow reflected through the vent above. The stillness has a sound of its own, a hum so low it blends with the rhythm of your breathing. According to travelers who wintered among these northern peoples, the silence of the night was not emptiness but presence. When the world stopped moving, the smallest noises grew large enough to fill it. The crack of ice on the river, the flutter of an owl's wings, even the whisper of breath against fur, each sound reminded listeners that life continued quietly beyond sight. You listen now. Somewhere outside, a wolf calls, its cry long and hollow. The echo drifts over the frozen plain and fades like a sigh. Closer, you hear snow falling from the roof, sliding down in a slow cascade. Within the shelter, nothing moves except breath. Each exhale seems to join a single shared rhythm, the whole lodge breathing as one. A small but fascinating entry in a 1780 fur trader's journal tells of people describing the night's quiet as a living thing. They called it the Great Stillness, a spirit that walked through camps to remind the living of balance. To speak too loudly or move too quickly risked disturbing that spirit. Instead, they learned to listen, to let stillness pass through them like wind through grass. Modern researchers studying acoustic ecology now confirm what those people always knew. Silence has texture. Snow absorbs sound differently depending on its depth and density, creating subtle shifts in tone that seasoned listeners could recognize. The ancestors read those changes the way others read stars. You close your eyes and feel how the silence rests against your skin. It is not cold, but weightless. The longer you listen, the warmer you feel, as though the quiet itself is a blanket. According to oral histories, nights without fire were moments of meditation. People used the stillness to feel their connection to the earth. Some described hearing the heartbeat of the ground beneath them, a slow pulse deep under ice. Whether imagination or awareness, it brought peace. One lesser-known story collected by an ethnographer tells of a woman who once lost her way in a blizzard. When the wind stopped and silence fell, she sat down in the snow, certain she would die. Then she began to hear faint tones, low, steady, and musical. She followed the sound with her eyes closed, trusting it completely. When she opened them again, she had reached her camp. Later she said the earth had sung her home. Historians still argue about how literal such stories were meant to be. Some say they were poetic ways of describing instinct. Others believe the people truly perceived what modern ears cannot. Regardless, silence here was not absence, but guidance. You sit up slightly, eyes open to the faint glow above. Your breath rises like smoke and disappears. The air carries the faint scent of hide, pine, and human life. It is astonishing how warm the world feels without a single flame, warmed instead by the hush of living bodies. According to one observer from the 1800s, families often fell asleep in shifts, ensuring that at least one person stayed half awake to watch and listen. The watcher's task was not only safety but reverence. To sit quietly through the deep hours of the night was considered a kind of prayer, an act of humility before the vastness of the world. A curious note from a missionary's journal describes how some tribes had words for kinds of quiet: the silence before snow, the silence after wind, the silence of deep sleep. Each carried its own feeling, its own lesson. To name stillness was to understand it. Experts in cultural linguistics now point to this as proof of an intimate relationship between people and sound. What others would call nothingness, they heard as nuance, a vocabulary of peace. You shift under your blanket, careful not to disturb the person beside you. The air is cool against your cheeks but warm inside your cocoon of fur. The silence thickens again, settling into your ears like music with no melody. Outside, an owl hoots once, low and deliberate. The sound folds neatly into the quiet, like a single thread in a vast weave. You feel it vibrate inside your chest. Every small sound carries meaning. Every heartbeat joins the pattern. A charming story told among elders says that in the heart of winter, when even the animals stop moving, silence becomes a doorway. If you listen closely, You can hear your own ancestors breathing on the other side. The stillness, they said, was not empty but full of presence. You draw the fur closer to your chin. Your pulse slows, matching the rhythm around you. The cold no longer feels sharp. It feels alive. The soundless air presses close. A reminder that peace is not the absence of life, but the shape it takes when everything rests. Before your eyes close, you think about how easily modern people fill their nights with noise, how silence now feels like a rarity instead of a gift. Here, though, it is medicine. You understand why they guarded it so carefully, why even whispers felt sacred. The lodge breathes with you. The stillness deepens until it seems to hum faintly in your bones. And then, somewhere between one breath and the next, you drift into sleep, carried not by warmth or story, but by the endless, gentle sound of nothing at all. You wake to a faint shimmer of light filtering through the snow-packed roof, the air still heavy with the scent of cedar and oil. Outside, the wind sighs like a sleeping animal, and for a moment, you feel as though you are floating in time itself. The lodge is quiet, the kind of silence that follows deep rest. Then, somewhere close, a soft scratching begins, the sound of bone tools against wood. Someone is carving. According to early accounts from traders and missionaries, winter nights were not idle ones. When storms kept the people indoors, their hands remained busy. Women mended clothing, carved combs, or shaped needles from bone. Men and women alike worked on tools or small sculptures, shaping necessity into art. Creation was the other half of survival. You watch the figure near the wall, her back straight, her hands sure. She holds a thin piece of caribou bone and a sharp flake of stone. With steady strokes, she shapes the material into a smooth curve. The rhythm of her motion is mesmerizing. Scrape, pause, turn, scrape again. Each sound settles into the hush like the tick of a patient clock. A small but fascinating note from an explorer's journal mentions that the women often carved while the others slept. The faint, rasping sound became a lullaby for those drifting into dreams. It was said that the sound of creation brought peace to the sleeping spirit, reminding it that life continued even through darkness. Researchers studying Arctic craftsmanship later discovered that many of these winter-made tools carried marks of artistry far beyond their function. Needles engraved with tiny patterns, spoons decorated with symbols of the moon and wind. Practical objects became vessels of beauty, testaments to the human need to create even when the world froze silent outside. You move closer and watch the woman's hands. Her fingers are cracked from cold but graceful, steady in their purpose. When she lifts the bone to the lamplight, you see that it has been shaped into a small figure, a human form, arms open, head tilted slightly upward. Its face bears no features, yet somehow it feels alive. According to oral traditions, such figures were not idols but companions. They held stories, blessings, and fragments of memory. A mother might carve one for her child, pressing it into the small hand before sleep to guard against nightmares. A traveler might carry one in a pouch to feel less alone in the snow. Each carving carried the warmth of its maker's touch. A curious entry from a Jesuit observer notes that women sometimes mixed powdered bone with animal fat to fill small cracks in these carvings, sealing them as if closing wounds. He wrote of it as superstition, yet in its way, it was an act of tenderness, mending the inanimate as carefully as the living. Experts in anthropology still discuss the meaning of these small sculptures. Some call them talismans, others art therapy before the term existed. What cannot be debated is their endurance. Many still exist, smooth from generations of hands, still carrying the fingerprints of those who made them. You sit beside the carver as she works. She glances at you briefly and smiles, her expression calm and knowing. "This one," she says softly, "is for warmth." She touches the chest of the little figure, just above where its heart would be, and then presses it against your palm. The bone feels cool at first, then slowly warms to your skin. According to some field notes, it was believed that carved objects absorbed the warmth of the hand that held them. A figure kept close to the body became a vessel of heat, storing traces of the human spirit itself. To give such a carving was to share a fragment of one's own life. One lesser-known account describes how during the darkest weeks of winter, families arranged their small carvings in a circle before sleeping. Each figure represented an ancestor, a wish, or a protection. The family slept within that circle, surrounded by the quiet strength of memory. You glance around the lodge and notice several such figures resting along the wall, some shaped like animals, others like people, others abstract but graceful. Their presence gives the room a feeling of companionship. Even in silence, it feels full. Modern psychologists have written that such acts of creation served as emotional anchors during isolation. To carve, to shape, to give form to hope was a way of staying human in a season that stripped life to its bare bones. The small sculptures were reminders that beauty could survive any cold. You hold the figure tightly for a moment, its warmth spreading through your palm. The woman nods once, satisfied, and returns to her work. The sound of scraping bone resumes, blending with the distant whisper of snow against hide. The world outside may still be frozen, but inside, something living continues to hum. A tale told among the Cree speaks of a woman who carved a tiny bird from ivory during a storm that lasted 7 days. When the sun finally returned, the carving was gone, and outside, a real bird perched on the lodgepole. Whether miracle or metaphor, the story reminds listeners that creation has its own kind of magic. You lie back again, holding the small figure close to your chest. The edges are smooth now, fitting perfectly against your skin. As you drift towards sleep, you think about how warmth can take so many forms: hands, words, touch, and the quiet sound of something being made with love. The last sound you hear before the dream takes you is the rhythm of bone-meeting stone, steady as a heartbeat, shaping comfort out of the cold. You wake to the sound of a soft crunching outside, footsteps pressing gently into snow that has fallen through the night. The world is white again, clean and new. You pull aside the flap and step into the faint blue light. The air tastes sharp and sweet. The horizon glows faintly pink where the sun hides, waiting to rise. Around the camp, thin trails of smoke rise from distant lodges. Not flames, but breath, the sign of life enduring quietly. According to early accounts written by explorers who lived through northern winters, mornings like this marked the true heart of the cold season. The storms would pause, the wind would rest, and the world would seem to hold its breath. These moments were precious, used not for labor but reflection. The women often began the day with small tasks that steadied the spirit, brushing snow from hides, singing softly to the dawn, or checking the sleeping forms of children still bundled in fur. You walk slowly between the lodges, hearing the muffled rhythm of your own footsteps. Every sound feels magnified in the stillness. When you stop, you can hear your heart beat. You see a woman kneeling near a frozen stream, her hands bare. She scoops snow and rubs it over her face, her expression calm and bright. The act looks like prayer. A lesser-known note from an 18th century traveller mentions that women sometimes greeted the first calm after a storm with rituals of renewal. They washed their faces with snow, believing the cold water awakened courage and clarity. It was a cleansing of body and spirit, a reminder that even after nights of darkness, the world still offered purity. Modern researchers who study these practices see them as forms of mindfulness before the word existed. The repetition of simple, gentle actions, rubbing snow, humming softly, brushing hides, reconnected the body to rhythm, grounding the mind in patience. You kneel beside the stream and scoop a handful of snow yourself. It stings at first, then numbs your skin, then leaves behind a tingling warmth. The air around you smells faintly of pine and frost. When you lift your head, you can see a hawk gliding above the trees, silent and effortless. According to oral tradition, the morning after a storm was called the listening day. It was believed that the land spoke most clearly when freshly covered in snow. People were taught to walk slowly, to let their footsteps make soft sounds that blended rather than broke the silence. The sky was watched for signs, the light read like scripture. A curious record from a missionary's diary describes how some families would scatter seeds or crumbs outside their lodges on such mornings. The offering was not for hunger, but for harmony, a thank you to the birds and small animals that survived alongside them. Every creature, no matter how small, shared in the fragile peace of winter. Experts who write about ecological traditions often remark that these customs reflect a profound respect for equilibrium. The people knew that survival was not conquest but cooperation. Even rest was treated as a sacred act. You watch the woman near the stream finish her small ritual. She stands slowly, brushing frost from her skirt. Then she closes her eyes and breathes deeply, her breath curling upward like smoke. Her stillness is more beautiful than any movement. According to ethnographers, women often taught their daughters to pause this way, to acknowledge the cold as both challenge and teacher. They said the frost could harden a person who fought it, but could also sharpen one who listened to it. Strength was measured not by endurance alone, but by grace. One small but memorable story passed down through oral history tells of a young girl who tried to curse the cold, angry at its bite. Her grandmother stopped her gently, saying, "Do not curse what keeps you awake." The lesson lingered. Even hardship had its gifts. You walk farther, your breath clouding in the pale air. The world feels impossibly still. Each tree stands glazed with frost, every branch heavy but shining. You reach out and touch one, your glove brushing its surface. Tiny flakes fall, glinting like fragments of glass. Scientists today call this hoarfrost, crystals formed from frozen mist. But to the women of these lands, it was the sky's handwriting, a sign that spirits had walked during the night, leaving beauty in their wake. When children asked why it sparkled, mothers said the frost was laughter caught in the light. You smile at the thought. Around you, the snow seems to glow brighter. A few dogs trot past, tails high, their paws making perfect prints that vanish as drifting powder fills them again. Nothing here is permanent, yet everything feels eternal. You return toward the lodge, your body warmed by movement. The smell of food drifts faintly from within: smoke, fat, berries. The day has begun. Inside, people stir, wrapping themselves in furs, speaking in low voices. The air fills again with sound, slow and peaceful. A scholar once wrote that after every storm, life began as ceremony. The smallest acts, washing, walking, feeding the dogs, became expressions of gratitude. The quiet was not emptiness but renewal, the world reminding its people that peace is also part of survival. You sit by the entrance, watching light crawl across the snow. It glows gold now, soft and kind. The air feels lighter. Around you, others begin their day without hurry, as though they know time itself has slowed for them. You breathe in the cold one last time before rejoining the warmth inside. The taste of snow still lingers on your lips, crisp and clean. You feel awake in every sense, the kind of alertness that comes not from fear but from wonder. Inside, the laughter begins again, small but real. Someone hums a song about the sun returning. You close your eyes, listening, and realize that warmth is not only in the body, it is in attention, in stillness, in the willingness to greet each new morning as if it were a friend. The night is quiet again, but the cold feels gentler, softened by layers of snow that muffle even the wind. You lie awake for a moment, listening to the slow breathing of those around you. The air inside the lodge carries the faint sweetness of tanned hide and the deeper scent of bodies that have shared warmth through many nights. The sound of life is small but constant. You can almost hear the rhythm of hearts beating in unison. According to early records from northern camps, these long winters taught people to live by rhythm rather than time. There were no clocks to divide the night into hours, no bells to summon dawn. The body became the measure, guided by hunger, by rest, by the tilt of stars glimpsed through the vent. Women especially held the pulse of the household, waking when others stirred, sleeping when all seemed safe. You roll slightly, the fur rustling softly. The woman nearest to you opens her eyes, smiles faintly, and nods before closing them again. The exchange feels ancient and wordless, a shared agreement that the night will pass peacefully. A small but remarkable note from a Hudson Bay trader's diary describes how families sometimes moved in and out of sleep several times through the night. They called it the breathing rest. During each interval of waking, they would whisper stories, stretch stiff limbs, or simply sit in stillness until drowsiness returned. This segmented sleep was not seen as interruption but as harmony, the body and the world resting in the same slow rhythm. Researchers now understand that such cycles align with natural circadian rhythms when there is no artificial light. Modern science has confirmed what the ancestors knew instinctively, that deep rest comes not from forcing sleep, but from surrendering to its ebb and flow. You close your eyes and let your breathing fall into pattern. Around you, faint sounds continue: the rustle of fur, the soft snore of a child, the low murmur of wind outside. Every sound feels alive, carrying warmth. According to oral histories, people believed that winter nights had their own music. When the snow shifted or the wind changed pitch, they said the land was singing. Listening to it before sleep brought protection. Children were taught to imitate the sound softly, humming along until they drifted off. A curious note from a missionary's account describes how a woman once sang to the snow itself, whispering melodies shaped by breath. He wrote that the sound reminded him of water under ice, quiet yet constant. She told him the snow listened better than people did. Scholars continue to discuss the purpose of such midnight songs. Some say they were prayers for safety, others think they were lullabies shared between mothers and children. Yet every account agrees on one thing: the act of singing transformed fear into calm. The human voice, even whispered, filled the cold with presence. You hum quietly to yourself now, a low note that trembles against the air. The sound vibrates in your chest and fades, only to return in your imagination as an echo from the walls. For a moment, you understand how music could survive even without instruments, carried entirely in breath. One small but beautiful tradition, found in several northern tribes, describes how families measured the strength of their shelter by sound. If the wind's howl could not be heard inside, they knew the structure was tight. If it could, they adjusted hides or snow until the music softened. The night itself became a guide to craftsmanship. According to ethnographic accounts, the act of checking a shelter at night was often entrusted to women. Their hearing was trusted more keenly, their attention to tone more precise. They knew the difference between the sigh of snow settling and the whisper of a crack forming. In that sensitivity lay safety. You open your eyes again and watch a faint thread of moonlight slip through the vent above. It catches in the smoke, turning the air silver. Outside, the world glows faintly, endless white under pale stars. Inside, the warmth feels almost liquid. A lesser-known legend tells of a woman who once followed a moonbeam through the roof of her lodge and walked into the sky. She returned at dawn, carrying frost in her hair, and said she had seen the night from the other side. Her people called her the Dream Walker, believing she had learned the song that holds the stars in place. Historians often dismiss such stories as symbolic, yet they reveal something profound: the belief that the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual softened during deep winter. Night was not a wall but a doorway, and dreams were simply another kind of journey. You close your eyes again, letting the thoughts settle like snow. The rhythm of breathing fills your ears once more. The air inside the lodge is warm, but it holds a freshness that feels eternal. Each inhale tastes faintly of pine and smoke, reminders of the living world beyond the walls. Modern anthropologists call this pattern social warmth, the way shared breath and body heat influence emotional connection. But you do not need a name for it. You can feel it in every heartbeat near you, in every soft sound that replaces loneliness. You turn slightly and pull the blanket higher, the fur brushing against your cheek. Your body feels heavy but peaceful, cradled by warmth born from patience and closeness. Outside, the night continues to sing softly through snow and wind, and inside, that same song echoes quietly in human breath. You realize that this is the secret of survival in the endless cold: rhythm, closeness, and faith that warmth will always return, whether through body, voice, or dream. The world beyond the lodge can freeze, and still the heart will beat on, steady as the wind's own melody. The silence deepens again. Someone sighs. A child murmurs in sleep. You close your eyes and join the rhythm. Your last thought a soft echo of gratitude for breath, for warmth, and for the music that even silence cannot erase. You wake to the faint sound of crackling snow, the kind of brittle noise that comes only when the air is so cold it feels sharp enough to cut. The world outside glows white and silver, a frozen ocean stretching to the horizon. Inside, the air is thick and quiet. You sit up slowly, brushing frost from your blanket. The cold kisses your face, but you no longer shrink from it. The body has learned what the mind once feared. According to explorers who lived through winters among the northern peoples, the body itself became a tool of survival. Muscles remembered what warmth felt like and learned to keep it. The breath became measured, deliberate, saving strength. Each motion carried purpose. The people moved like dancers, graceful even in stillness. The cold no longer conquered them. It taught them discipline. You stretch your arms and feel your joints loosen, the fur sliding from your shoulders. Beside you, others stir. No one rushes. There is no need. The day will unfold as the cold allows. Life here is not controlled by hours but by temperature, by the slow rhythm of nature's breath. A lesser-known note in an early anthropologist's diary describes how women trained their bodies for endurance from childhood. They learned how to control shivering, to conserve energy through calm breathing. By adulthood, they could stand in the snow barefoot long enough to hang furs or fetch water without trembling. The observer wrote with awe, saying that they seemed born with an inner fire. Modern physiologists later confirmed that repeated exposure to cold trains the body to generate heat more efficiently, a process known as thermogenesis. Yet for those who lived here, it was not science but understanding. They treated their bodies like instruments, tuning them to the climate. You reach for a small bowl near your bed and dip your fingers into melted snow. The cold water wakes your skin, clears your thoughts. Around you, women begin their morning movements, rolling hides, shaking blankets, checking for leaks in the lodge wall. The air hums with quiet purpose. According to oral histories, winter mornings were exercises in ritual precision. Every gesture had meaning. A fold in the blanket reminded of gratitude. A tightened seam spoke of preparedness. Work was never mechanical. It was meditation. One small but fascinating detail found in the notes of a Jesuit missionary describes how some women used the act of breathing itself as prayer. Before stepping into the cold, they would exhale slowly, watching their breath cloud and fade. They said that seeing it vanish reminded them of life's fragility, and breathing again reaffirmed its return. Scholars who study comparative spirituality often point to such acts as evidence that mindfulness did not begin in temples but in landscapes like this. Where survival required constant awareness, the sacred was not found apart from life, it was woven through every movement. You stand and stretch again, the sound of your own joints soft in the quiet. The snow outside is blinding now, the sunlight scattering across its surface like shards of glass. You shield your eyes with your hand, feeling the warmth of light against your skin. For a moment, you are aware of every sensation: the sting of air, the heat of blood, the press of ground beneath your feet. According to ethnographic reports, the people called this awareness listening to the body. It meant knowing when to rest, when to move, when to eat, and when to think of something else entirely. Their wisdom lay in harmony, not in conquest. A curious account from an explorer describes a woman who, during a brutal cold snap, refused to add another layer of clothing. When asked why, she smiled and said, "I will tell my body it is already warm." The observer dismissed it as bravado, yet she survived the storm easily. Later studies in psychology might call it self-conditioning, but it also speaks of faith, the quiet command of mind over flesh. You watch as a group of children step outside, their laughter cutting through the cold air. They fall into the snow and roll, shrieking, then rise, glowing with energy. Their mothers smile, unafraid. Exposure to cold, it is said, builds strength. The air itself becomes a teacher, harsh but fair. Researchers writing on resilience now describe this way of life as a model of adaptive intelligence. Instead of fighting the environment, the people adapted through cooperation, body, mind, and community, acting as one organism. In that balance, they found not just survival but contentment. You walk to the entrance and look out at the frozen plain. The snow stretches endlessly, yet something within you feels at peace. The landscape that once seemed cruel now feels honest. Its silence holds no malice, only truth. The cold teaches you to move carefully, to breathe deeply, to value every flicker of heat and every heartbeat of companionship. According to a legend told by northern elders, the cold spirit once walked the earth searching for a people strong enough to befriend it. Most ran or hid, but one woman stood still and opened her hands. The spirit touched her skin, and instead of freezing, she smiled. It is said that from that day, her descendants carried a warmth that no winter could extinguish. You remember this story as you breathe in the sharp air. Perhaps endurance is not about defiance but acceptance, standing still until even the cold becomes familiar. You feel it now, the heat of your body against the chill of the wind, the balance between surrender and strength. Inside, the others begin to stir the morning meal, their voices low but bright. The smell of broth fills the air, rich and comforting. You turn back toward the warmth, stepping into the familiar dim light of the lodge. The cold clings to you for a moment before melting into the shared heat of the room. You sit down again, feeling the rhythm of breath and movement around you. It occurs to you that survival here has always been more than endurance. It is art, built from patience, knowledge, and grace. The cold world outside does not diminish the people who live within it. It defines their beauty. As the morning grows brighter, you pull your fur around your shoulders and close your eyes. The warmth of your own body feels like proof of every lesson the cold has taught you. Resilience, humility, stillness. The storm has become a friend now, and in its breath, you hear the whisper of life continuing, quietly and endlessly. The morning is softer than usual, as if the world itself has exhaled. A pale light filters through the snow-covered roof, and the air inside the lodge feels calm, almost sacred. You wake slowly, your breath warm against the fur, your body heavy with the comfort of many nights survived. The silence around you carries a different quality now, not the tense quiet of endurance, but the peace that follows it. According to the notes of early travelers, there always came a moment in the long winter when the cold no longer frightened anyone. It was not because it grew weaker, but because the people had learned its rhythm. They moved with it, breathed with it, rested inside its stillness. It became less an enemy and more an old companion, a teacher of patience. You sit up, rubbing your hands together to wake the blood in your fingers. The woman nearest to you smiles faintly, her eyes still half closed. The children stir, but do not rise. For now, everyone moves slowly, savoring the quiet. There is no rush to greet the day. The storm has passed, and peace deserves its own kind of attention. A small but beautiful note from a Jesuit missionary describes one of these mornings after deep winter. He wrote that the people emerged from their lodges as if from wombs, reborn by endurance. They did not shout or celebrate. They stood in silence, breathing in the sunlight, their faces calm and content. It was gratitude expressed not through words, but through stillness. Researchers in anthropology later suggested that such quiet renewal reflected a deep understanding of cycles. To live close to the land was to accept that suffering and rest were twins, that every hardship eventually softened into calm. To survive winter was not victory, it was balance. You rise and step outside. The air meets your face like silk. The snow beneath your feet no longer squeaks but sighs softly, melting under the touch of sunlight. The horizon stretches wide and bright. You inhale, and the air tastes like clean stone and pine sap. The dogs bark in the distance, their voices sharp but joyful. According to oral tradition, this is the time when people begin to dream of movement again. They prepare to follow the melting rivers, to hunt, to gather, to live in motion once more. Yet for a few lingering days, they stay still. These last days of stillness are not idleness, but reflection, a sacred pause before the return of life's noise. A lesser-known story from Cree lore tells of a woman who, after the final cold, sat in silence beside the snow until she could hear it melt. She said each drop carried the memory of the storms it had survived. Listening to it, she felt her own worries dissolve. The others later called her the Keeper of Thor. Experts who write about indigenous resilience describe such stories as forms of wisdom disguised as poetry. The people saw continuity where others saw endings. The melting of snow was not destruction, but transformation. What had once been barrier became nourishment for rivers, animals, and dreams alike. You stand there now, watching a thin trickle of water slide down a slope of snow. It catches the sunlight and flashes like glass. The sound of it is soft but clear. Around you, the air hums with the faint promise of change. Inside the lodge, laughter rises again. Someone teases another about snoring. A child runs to the entrance and calls out at the brightness, their voice ringing across the snow. Life returns easily, naturally, as if it had never paused. According to one anthropologist, these transitions between silence and sound, stillness and motion, were considered the heart of wisdom. Knowing how to rest was just as vital as knowing how to act. To be too still was to freeze. To rush too quickly was to break the fragile balance that held everything together. You sit down near the doorway, letting sunlight warm your face. The snow sparkles so brightly that your eyes water. For a moment, you think about all the nights behind you, the darkness, the wind, the shared warmth, the whispered songs. You understand now that survival was never about fighting the cold. It was about learning how to live alongside it, to find calm inside hardship and beauty inside stillness. A curious entry from an explorer's memoir tells of one final winter ritual. On the first morning when the sun returned strong enough to cast true shadows, the women would sweep their sleeping places clean and scatter a handful of ash outside. The ash symbolized what the fire had given, a quiet thank you to warmth itself. You imagine them now, graceful and slow, brushing the ground as sunlight glints on their hair. You look up at the sky. The blue is so deep it feels endless. The snow glows like silver in the light. You breathe deeply, feeling both small and infinite. The cold air no longer bites. It refreshes, reminding you of everything alive within it. You turn and step back inside, where the others are beginning to pack small bundles of clothing and tools. The laughter grows louder, and you can feel a shared energy in the air, a readiness for what comes next. The season of survival is ending. The season of movement is near. You sit one last time, pulling your blanket around your shoulders. The fur smells faintly of smoke and memory. You close your eyes and listen to the world breathing people. Wind, animals, snow, all pulsing together in one long, steady rhythm. You realize that this sound, this shared heartbeat, is what warmth truly is. And as you breathe in the last chill of winter, the story you have walked through begins to fade gently into peace. The world waits, silent and alive. Now the rhythm slows, the words soften, and the snow begins to melt inside your mind. The night becomes lighter, and your breath grows slower. You can still feel the weight of the fur against your skin, the warmth that no longer belongs only to the body but to the memory of everything you have learned. You think of the women who listened to the ice, who whispered to snow, who carried warmth in their hands and gave it away freely. Their patience, their stillness, their quiet strength linger in the air even now. You feel them around you, the hum of their songs, the peace of their silence. The storm has passed. The fire is within you. Every lesson of the cold has settled into your bones. That stillness is strength, that gentleness can protect, and that warmth is something made together. Let the snow fade now, slowly, gently. Let the world drift into quiet light. Breathe in one more time. The air is calm. The story is complete. Sleep well, traveler. The winter will watch over you.